Good evening. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
Councilmember Landman. Here. Councilmember Dvala,
Present.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Here.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Here.
Councilmember Honzak,
Present.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Here.
Good evening, everyone. Apologies for the delayed start. The council met earlier this evening in an administrative function session at 6:30 to discuss the city manager's review. And so we're running just a few minutes behind this evening, but thank you all for joining us. Great. Okay, so in terms of the agenda, just make sure. The agenda this evening includes two voting items. The first is the first reading ordinance approving the FY '27 budget amendment number 1. Then we will vote to convene as the Stormwater Management Board, and then vote on the first reading ordinance approving the FY '27 Stormwater Management Budget Amendment number 1. We will then have 4 work sessions this evening. The first is options to address unlawful restricted covenants. The second is implementation of a community connectors program. Third is a resolution committing to respectful, constructive, and dignified discourse. And then the fourth is recommended appointments to city boards and committees. On Wednesday, July the 29th, the council will meet again at 6:30 for an administrative function session regarding the city manager's review. And on Wednesday, July the 29th, the council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We will begin with a number of voting items. The second reading ordinance approving FY '27 budget amendment number 1. Second reading ordinance approving FY '27 stormwater management budget amendment number 1. Resolution regarding approach to removal of unlawful restricted covenants. Resolution regarding implementation of a community connectors program. Resolution regarding city council's approach to examining the risks and benefits of changing to 4-year terms. Resolution committing to respectful, constructive, and dignified discourse during public meetings. We have our consent agenda. Resolution providing for appointments to the Grants Review Committee. Resolution providing for appointments to the Recreation Committee. Resolution setting forth the dates of the City Council summer recess. And then we will have 2 work sessions that evening. The first is the Public Safety Task Force Annual Report. And the second is a resolution ensuring trans and non-binary protections. We have a meeting that is tentatively slated for August the 5th. In the event that we're not able to complete votes, otherwise, we will be on recess from August the 5th until Wednesday, September the 7th. I'm sorry, September the 9th. And so with that, we are going to move to public comments this evening. Do we have any public comments on voting items? And again, this evening, our voting items is a first reading ordinance approving FY '27 budget amendment number 1. First reading ordinance approving FY '27 stormwater budget amendment number 1. Any public comments on those items? Okay. Do we have any virtual public comments on those items?
No.
Okay. With that, we're going to move to general public comments this evening. Do we have any general public comments? As a reminder, comments are limited to 3 minutes. We're asking for everyone to be civil, no use of profanity, name calling, all that good stuff, but everybody here knows how to act. And just as a FYI, the council does not respond to comments provided. So any public, come on down.
Hello. Hey. Thank you. My name is Robert Beets. I'm from Ward 2. I saw the general item coming up about racial covenants, and I just had a few thoughts to share about that. First off, I really appreciate that the council is taking on this effort and addressing this issue. I think this is a really important one to address and rectify historical injustices. I believe that's an issue that the whole public owns, and I'm glad to see the city as an agent of the public to be leading that effort. I believe removing racial covenant or racial language from covenants is very critical, and I think it very much helps us work with those historical injustices and to move forward as a community as a whole. I did have some concerns about the size of expenditures that I see and how the use of funds or where it is going. Having funds to address racial inequity going to publications that have for outreach is a little bit of a concern to me, especially seeing the Washington Post in there. I have concerns about seeing that the use of funds could be going largely to lawyers and financial agents who may or may not be acting with racial equity in mind in the rest of their practices. Seeing numbers at $250 and $450 an hour seem to be a bit of an issue, and just something to be very cognizant of if that is a great use of the funds, or if there's just options to have that happen in a little bit less expensive way. I've got some examples of seeing that in other communities that I'll talk about at the end. And seeing the purpose in the slides, I think the racial covenants is a critical piece of this, but seeing in the presentation slides that said the city would like to address, or the purpose was to address the lasting impacts of historic racial inequities and to advance equity. I really think there's a lot of behavior aspects. I think there's a lot of culture in real estate, finance, and injustices that persist now, especially with a Fair Housing Act that is kind of based on a colorblind approach, but not really an equity approach. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to address this issue with outreach to real estate professionals. People are selling their homes and how they address selling their homes to an open market, and what different home offers can look like, and really trying to reduce or have an equity lens when you're looking at offers from other people. You can get a lot of advice from lawyers about taking cash offers and not taking offers that have financing on it. Those are kinds of things that communally and culturally you can address that help really create more equity in real estate. And I would love that this is a large public dialogue, in addition to the racial covenants, because in Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm from, which is a very progressive community, but has a lot of injustice in real estate. They've started a few different programs that has raised about $1.4 million of private money to go towards down payment grants and helping people buy homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Arthur David Olson, Ward 4, and I am still neither an accountant nor a lawyer. One lesson from the latest round of budget work is that it's possible to increase general fund revenue without relying on the property tax, as witness the utility tax increase. The good news is that more such increases are possible. The city sets up funds such as the ARPA Fund and Stormwater Fund when there are restrictions on how money can be spent. There's a restriction on stop sign camera revenue. It must be used, quote, solely for public safety purposes, including pedestrian or highway safety programs, end quote. But as the police chief noted in advocating for a red light camera program, there's no such restriction on red light camera revenue. Page 58 of the city manager's proposed fiscal year 2027 budget provides information on the red light and stop sign camera fund. That fund receives revenue from both camera programs. Alas, mixing restricted and unrestricted revenue is suboptimal bookkeeping. The city might set up two separate camera funds, but it's simpler to treat red light camera revenue as general fund revenue, eliminating the need for a separate red light camera fund. To be clear, this will not increase total revenue. It will, though, make for better bookkeeping and will help avoid confusion about the possible use of red light camera revenue. I hope the council will direct a change in how camera revenue is accounted for. Another camera matter. Maryland law allows for stop sign cameras, quote, on highways located in a school zone maintained by a local jurisdiction or on state highways located in a school zone. There's no mention of cameras being allowed within half a mile of a school. And city law has very narrow definitions of the city's school zones. The council may want to expand the definition of school zones in the city. In any case, I hope the council will ensure that the city's stop sign camera program is operated in accordance with Maryland requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening? Seeing none, do we have any virtual public comments this evening?
We were hoping to have Mary Jane Machui, but I don't see that she's on the line. She's not on.
Okay. All right, we're going to move to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Councilmember Gilbert.
Thanks, Mayor. I wanted to share a couple of things that I wanted to discuss last week, but right as public comments were ending, and before we had a chance for council comments, I had an emergency and I had to step out. So I think Mr. Huebner, Paul Huebner, was talking at the time. So Mr. Huebner, if you're listening, I apologize that I had to leave the room as you were speaking. I did hear that he was advocating for racial equity as it pertained to the resolution for the rent stabilization work, and I appreciate both. I appreciate both him and Councilmember Schlegel for that advocating for racial equity and for wanting it to be in a resolution. By the time I came back, all my colleagues had spoken already, so I apologize to you all for not hearing your comments. But I did hear the mayor loud and clear, and I must say I agree that looking at things from a racial equity perspective is probably most suited in this case for council and staff, and I believe that staff is well equipped, and I know that this council is well equipped. And I've seen staff in action and how they respond to things and how they take into consideration racial equity. So I feel confident that once RSG is done with their process, that we can really take a look at things through that lens. Something else I wanted to share, that I had the opportunity to attend an 80-year-old birthday party for a former police officer. His name's Carl Coates, and Carl came to the city in the mid-90s and from Baltimore City as a retiree, and really poured his heart and soul into the community. So I want to say just a few words and thanks to him. For anyone that may have known him, he's doing well, and 80 looks really good on him. So he did a magnificent job and had really good balance in his policing, and he ushered in a generation of police officers, especially black police officers that hadn't quite found their voice in the police department and in the police world and the profession, myself being one. And he was apologetically himself, and he really had good balance in between community policing and enforcement, and he changed the way we did things. He really changed the culture within the police department, kept us together, and there are members of our community who were involved in criminal activity back then that are doing phenomenal work in our community and around our community, who credit him with changing their minds and in their choice of profession. So again, happy belated birthday to to Carl. And on that note, in talking about former colleagues, I got a chance to watch the walkout for Cindy Williams, Lieutenant Cindy Williams. Her last day was today. A very emotional day. I worked some years with her, and wishing her a happy retirement and whatever's next. And to the officers, I didn't get a chance to say hello to two that were promoted earlier, but one is Victor Glushkov, who I served with, who was promoted today. Would have had the ceremony today, but he was recently promoted to the rank of lieutenant. So I'm really happy for him. And really quickly, if I can, Mayor, share that. I know I spoke a few weeks ago about my communications with Secretary Jake Day from the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development regarding the Edinburgh, which is slated to be redeveloped by MHP. And I had some questions for him in hopes that we could work on some things to protect those tenants who may not qualify once they're relocated. And I did get a response from him, and I wanted to let everybody know, since I said something publicly, that I had reached out to him and hadn't received a response. He did respond, and I was happy that he did. He had been given a lot of thought, and he said he will be paying close attention. So really happy that Secretary Day reached out. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Gilbert, Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. I'll just keep it brief. I know last week, excuse me, last week I said how for next week's meeting, we're going to have a work session to talk about how to better support and protect our trans and non-binary residents of all ages. I want to say thank you. I did hear from a few folks in town that were excited that we would be talking about that. So I just wanted to say again, if there's any residents that have feedback or questions or want to be on the loop, particularly residents who are trans and or have a trans person in their family, please reach out. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Westlake. Do we have any other council comments this evening? Okay. So I want to thank all of those that came out and provided feedback. I definitely want to thank our Ward 2 resident that came out and provided feedback, particularly as it relates to publication. It has been a thorn in my side as well. We have written letters in support of legislation to try to allow for municipalities to not be held to the state requirement that we post these kinds of things in widely disseminated news sources. We have also most recently sent forward a legislative action request to the Maryland Municipal League, and I have informed their legislative advocates that these are things we're planning to fight for regardless, asking for a bill to again come back in Annapolis that would alleviate or eliminate the need for municipalities to have to post all of these types of notices in widely circulated printed papers. So that was something that was circulating in Annapolis this year, this session. It did not pass, but we are continuing the fight, because even if it doesn't necessarily help us with moving this particular restricted covenants work forward, we have to post things quite often, and so it could eliminate some resources down the line. And so thank you very much for that, and I also appreciate the feedback regarding how and the approach that we take in terms of addressing the restricted covenants. And thank you, Arthur, for your feedback. It's always good to hear your thoughts on ways in which we can improve the budget. So definitely look forward to following up on that item. I will be in Madison, Wisconsin tomorrow. So I am part of the Mayor's Innovation Project, and they have their summer conference that is happening. This started today, but it'll be going until Saturday. I will be facilitating a panel discussion on building decarbonization pathways for diverse regulatory environments. And so be a great opportunity for us to highlight some of the work that we're doing in Tacoma Park, particularly as a small city, relatively speaking, and the work that we're doing to encourage electrification and energy efficiency within our multifamily housing. And we'll also have a wonderful time with the mayor of Madison, learning about all of the wonderful things that they're doing. And there'll be lots of discussions regarding housing. So definitely looking forward to that. And I think those are the major things. With that, I'm going to turn things over. Oh, I apologize to the police staff that were recognized today in terms of their promotion, and Lieutenant Williams for missing a walkout. I was working in Rockville today, and I just missed them. But I do just want to talk about how important it is to make sure that we're celebrating our officers that are doing the right thing. And Lieutenant Williams has been, as Councilmember Gilbert noted, a mainstay in our police department, not only for the wonderful work that she does serving in her role, but also the different things that she's done within the community. So job well done, Lieutenant Williams, and she would definitely be missed. And so with that, I will turn things over to City Manager DeSpirito.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to council, and to all our visitors and residents who are with us this evening. First, from the Housing and Community Development Department. From July 27th through October, the back row spaces in the Junction parking lot will be used by construction workers conducting pipeline maintenance along Carroll Avenue. The construction workers will be using the spaces to stage materials and equipment. We ask that residents please avoid parking in those spaces during this time. Again, that's July 27th through October, so it's a sizable project. From the police department, the back to school backpack donation drive kicked off yesterday, July 21st, and will run through August 14th. There's a donation bin in our police department lobby here at 7500 Maple Avenue. Items needed include binders, scissors, calculators, tissues, lunch boxes, and the traditional items of pencils, crayons, and paper. A full list of requested items can be found on the city website. Thank you for making a difference in the lives of local children. Save the date. National Night Out is scheduled for Tuesday, August 4th. There will be games, bounce houses, face painting, and giveaways, so plan to stop by and have some fun. This will be from 6 to 9 p.m. in front of the Piney Branch Elementary School at 7510 Maple Avenue. From the Public Works Department, a reminder that Washington Gas will be replacing the gas main on Carroll Avenue between Eastern Avenue and Columbia Avenue beginning next Monday, July 27th. Thus, the need for the parking spaces in the junction lot. The work is expected to take 2 months. The work hours will be from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., Monday through Friday. The operation will close a single lane, and flaggers will direct traffic through the construction area. The Maryland Department of Transportation has notified the city that it plans to resurface Piney Branch Road between Eastern Avenue and Sligo Avenue. The work is expected to start August 5th and last about 3 weeks. Work hours are expected to be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The operation will close a single lane at a time, and flaggers will direct traffic through the construction area. From the Recreation Department, seniors, join us for a fun-filled day at the Montgomery County Agricultural Fair during the special Senior Day celebration on Tuesday, August 18th. The cost is $6. Enjoy live entertainment, music, vendors, exhibits, and festive fair fun with friends. Spaces are limited. For more registration information regarding senior trips, please visit us in person or online. For more registration information at tacomaparkmd.gov/ Recreation. Please be advised that the Lee Jordan Field will be closed for renovations from July 20th through August 21st. And Ed Wilhelm Field will be closed for renovations from July 27th through August 21st. During this period, the fields will be inaccessible to the public to ensure the safety of all visitors and to allow for necessary improvements. We appreciate your understanding and cooperation as we work to enhance these community spaces. Regular use of the fields will resume on August 24th, weather permitting. If you have any questions or would like additional information, please feel free to contact John Webster at 240-687-2202. And from the City Manager's Office, our staff shout-out this week is from our Recreation Department. Congratulations to Raekwon White on being named the Maryland Recreation and Parks Association Member of the Quarter. Recognized at yesterday's Summer General Membership Meeting, this quarterly award celebrates a member whose involvement and accomplishments have helped move the association forward, and Ray's contributions this quarter made him a clear choice. Ray was instrumental in getting the MRPA Conference annual golf tournament off the ground, from the planning meetings leading up to the event to being hands-on the day of, helping with registration, general coordination, lunch, pictures, and everything else in between. His dedication and willingness to jump in wherever needed helped to make the tournament a real success. After the golf tournament, he continued helping wherever needed during the state conference this past April. So thank you, Ray, for representing Tacoma Park so well and being a huge asset to the State Parks and Recreation Association. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we're going to move to our first presentation this evening. It is the Youth Council Annual Report.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here this evening. I have the pleasure of letting you know how busy your Youth Council has been this past year and how many projects they have taken on, and just how amazing our local students are. My name's Christine Heidebrecht. I am the Executive Assistant and the Special Projects Coordinator for the City Manager's Office, as well as the advisor to the Youth Council. Advancing. It's not advancing, sorry. Okay. So as a reminder, the council was created in 2017, and the charter includes the goals of the Youth Council to be multifold, with participation in the system of local government being our top priority, and then helping the council address problems and accomplish the goals in the community by working directly with the representatives of the youth, and to serve the youth of Tacoma Park in a multitude of ways. Our 2025-2026 Youth Council members include the names that you see before you. I went ahead and color-coded the wards on the list so that you can see the representatives from your wards. As you can see, wards 1 and wards 4 and 5, we only had one representative, and so I would love to see more youth from those wards apply to be on the council for next year. We also had the pleasure of having an ex officio member this year, so I thank you very much for discussing that at the beginning of the year and including him. He had been a member last year, and his family had moved just outside the bounds, and he was really interested in participating once again, and you made that happen. So thank you very much for that. Our 2025-2026 projects for the year kicked off by assisting the police and the fire departments with a toy drive. We then broke into small groups and tackled 3 different projects, including participating with the sustainability team on their multifamily compost project. We hosted a youth town hall, and there was to be a report to the council with a request. And there will be more on that in just a moment. We also then interviewed nonprofits in our area. We interviewed 11 different nonprofits, and City TV assisted us. So those will actually be appearing on City TV. And these were no small interviews. These are going to run 20 to 30 minutes each. So some very good questions asked. We also were working on planning a soccer tournament. We participated in legislation and tabling events. And then we had a big plan for our July 4th parade, which we will also discuss. The first item was participating with the police department and volunteer fire department on their toy drive. This is something that those 2 departments have worked on for multiple years. They realized this year that there were many more families in need, just due to the different financial things that have occurred in our area recently, from parents being laid off to just the price of everything going up. And so they doubled the number of kids they wanted to serve to 400. And they reached out to the youth council and asked if we could assist. We put out collection bins at some local businesses and at the Blair High School, and we were able to collect over 40 different toys to participate in that with. This ties to the purpose of helping to instill a feeling of positive self-worth and esteem, teaching respect for the rights of others, and promoting community pride. Next was our small group projects. The first being partnering with our sustainability team to help promote the pilot program for the multifamily food waste collection. And I actually just received an email today. There is one member of our youth council still working on this. They have developed a sticker that they want to mass produce and send out to help continue getting the word out. So this was clearly something that struck home for her. And so we are working on seeing if we can't continue that. The second was a very successful youth town hall at Montgomery Blair High School. We had 3 different topics that we approached, and it was youth voting, the impacts of ICE and immigration on area youth, and youth incarceration. The Youth Council invited our local, county, state, and federal speakers to share their experiences. And many of you were able to participate with us. Thank you so much. And a big thank you if any of our other participants are watching this. It was an amazing day. We had over 80 students from Montgomery Blair participate in each portion of the day. So we thought it a huge success. Finally, there was to be a presentation before me. A small group, a small subcommittee, had wanted to approach you and ask about extending the hours that parks can remain open. They had realized that with everything becoming more expensive in the area, that youth were having a hard time finding things that they can do. And they thought, you know, if the parks could stay open a little bit later, that might be of benefit. Currently, the parks close when it gets dark. And in the summertime, that's not as big a deal. But fall and winter, it's 5 o'clock and it's dark. So they had done research. They had spoken with our Public Works Director. They had spoken with some of our council members for their experiences in the past. And we're ready to ask you if you would consider looking into that. They knew that this wasn't something that was a flip of a switch and could just automatically happen. So this was more an exercise in approaching the council and seeing if a topic could be addressed over the long term. Why it didn't happen. And this one's hard for me. As they spoke to people in the community, they heard negative feedback, and it silenced their voices. They didn't think they had the support to come before you and share their desires. And so that opportunity was stolen from them. What it has told me is that this next year, that is one of the things we're going to discuss, is that it's okay to have an idea that is not necessarily popular. It might kick off a conversation. We might find 3 parks that can stay open until 9 p.m. in the winter. Who knows what could happen? But the council cannot take action if they do not know the desire. And so we're going to turn this into a learning opportunity. Our next item that I am very proud of, because I come from a nonprofit management background, is our interviews with some of our local nonprofits. We included places like the Dance Exchange, our Community Food Forest, Crossroads Community Food Network, Educare, Small Things Matter. And as I mentioned, these are about 20 to 30 minutes each, a very deep dive. City TV has actually put together a small promo, so if we can take a moment and see what might be happening.
Taking care of the community is a big part of what we do. People come to volunteer, people come to learn, people come to teach.
We offer mental health services, mental health treatments, housing stability, food.
Our primary goal is for children to have childhood.
It's to teach teamwork. With teamwork comes friendships, and that's really the goal.
We just figured out how to help people, and it just kept going. The need didn't go away when the pandemic.
By doing these small acts of kindness, you can affect big change in the world.
What is the biggest challenge?
We have so many people that want our service and more that we're able to serve at our current capacity.
As a nonprofit, funding and access to resources.
Last year there was questions about whether the farmers market should even open. Without hesitation, we were like, no, we're going to continue to show up.
Infrastructure expansion, infrastructure limitations, limited fundings and grants, and finding partnerships.
For the department itself, have a lot more active members and a lot more people who find a love to help people.
It's really physically and mentally exhausting, but they always go above and beyond.
How do you measure success? We gave 60 to 70 rides to individuals. We worked on 160 or 170 different home repairs.
We work with a lot of community partners.
The fact that we've gone from 13 households to 360, that didn't happen overnight.
I get the joy out of helping people. Going to somebody's worst day of their lives and I make it better, that's the best feeling in the world.
Living in a place like Tacoma Park, it's very easy to take an idea and then find people who can gather and support that.
This is a hard, what is it, 60 minutes?
That's very...
This project tied to our purpose of helping to instill a feeling of positive self-worth and esteem, teaching respect for the rights of others, and promoting community pride. And there is so much to be proud of in this community. I got to watch over each of the interviews, and I was floored by the intelligent questions that were asked. And as I mentioned, I come from a nonprofit background, and this was something that was very important to me because so many people don't understand how their nonprofits work. And so I thought if we can start our youth off with a full understanding of the things that they are up against every day and how they are a huge component of the things that a city can achieve, they go forward and they will bless their communities in the future with that understanding. Next, we had been planning a World Cup-style soccer tournament. This was something that we had spent almost the entire year on. And you might know, we did not host a World Cup soccer tournament. What we did find out, however, was how important it was to be able to research and find out the legal and insurance ramifications of having a number of youth involved in something as physical as soccer, finding space for such games, and being able to then market and encourage as many participants as possible. And so while we did not actually achieve the event itself, planning a large event was something that they had much experience in, much conversation around, and perhaps we'll be able to do something along these lines next year now that we've got some groundwork laid. This ties to the purpose of planning and implementing social, educational, cultural, and recreational activities for the youth. Legislation and tabling. were pleased to be able to submit testimony on Maryland HB 0486, the Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. I don't know if you had an opportunity to hear what our youth council had put together, but they put together an eloquent argument for that case. And that was a lovely thing to get to see them participate in at a state level, getting to have their voices heard. Tabling. So one of the other things that we were trying to do is encourage more students to participate in our voting rights as 16 and 17-year-olds in the city, as well as to possibly consider being on the council next year. And so we participated at the Old School, New School basketball tournament, at the Flower Avenue Together, and at Juneteenth. So I would like to take a moment and let you know that applications are going to be available online, hopefully within the next week, and that you can share them with anyone entering the grades 7 through 12 who maintain a 2.5 GPA. And just as an extra incentive, this next year, 2006 into 2007, is our 10th cohort for the Youth Council. And so this is a kind of a lovely thing to see that we have been able to continue for this many years. And finally, our July 4th parade event. I'm going to take a moment and bring up a couple of friends. One moment. May I introduce Bob the Yeti and Harry the Alien. I didn't name them. It's how it happened. These two gentlemen were going to assist us in encouraging more folks to participate in their voting rights. Sometimes what we have learned is that people think that registering to vote and participating at that level is a very complicated process. And so we wanted to make it easier for them to realize that it breaks down into pretty much 3 easy steps. Registering, which you can do through our city clerk. The forms are online. Educating yourself on the candidates or the topics that are before you, and then making sure that you get to your polling place and voting that day. We had created this one because we thought that voting as to see whether or not Yetis or aliens were more likely to be real would be enough of a topic to get folks to talking, and enough controversy around it. Like, what do you think you're actually going to find first? And it's been kind of fun because if you were to poll amongst yourself now, I bet you're going to find 3 people going one way and 3 people going another way and 2 people going, I don't know. So it was meant to encourage those types of conversations and then be able to be transferred into that concept of now see how easy it would be to vote for your ward and participate and make sure that your voice is heard. One of the things we were going to do after a person voted was provide a little Yeti or a little alien. So I currently have 1,000. And as adorable as they are, I don't need 1,000. So one of the things that we are working on is reaching out to local businesses and seeing if we can still continue this idea, possibly by a scavenger hunt. So if they enter 3 different businesses and learn a step at each business and then come down to the community center, they can collect their reward. So we're going to continue to work on that over the summer as well. Are there any questions?
I just want to say thank you so much. Our youth council has done a tremendous amount of work. I am just so in awe at all of the work that they've been doing and all of the work that you've been doing with them. Hearing all of the joys and the pains that they've experienced, although sometimes they can be a little disappointing.
Yes.
They sound a lot like an adult council, where you have some wins, you have some ideas that are great, and everyone boo you. You do a lot of legwork only to pass it off to the next council to build. So it is one of those things that is such a vital life skill for our youth to learn in terms of how to keep pressing forward and persevering. And in terms of the idea about parks being open longer, I was actually in some conversations with folks about lighting at some of our parks, not just as it relates to kid play, but also I think some lighting could also help with some safety issues. Because I got caught in the dark at the old school, new school basketball tournament, and I was like, why don't we have lights? So I have spoken to council member Stewart, and I will follow up with her and her folks again about what are all of the hoops we have to jump through in order to get some additional lighting in some of our park areas. So thank you very much, Christine, and to the Youth Council for continuing to keep us focused on our youth and the things that they need in our community. Councilmember Honzak.
If I can just pile on. This is so amazing. The Youth Council was so very active this year under your leadership and guidance and counsel. And a couple of things just caught my attention that I just wanted to lift up. I mean, one is your unbelievable and unwavering enthusiasm. You clearly threw your whole self into it, and it shows. And that nonprofit video was just spectacular. I hope that it makes the rounds in our community. I hope we can have a link to it so we could click on it and send it out on our various lists. Yes, maybe. That would be super cool.
Yes.
Is that possible?
Once
Okay,
the
it's
videos
on
are
YouTube?
Once the videos are completely edited together, they are going to be on YouTube, and each of the nonprofits will get to post it on their socials or on their webpage to help get the word out about all the work that they do.
Cool. It was just so neat to see our young people in our community, like Howard Kahn in a chair, looking like he's on 60 Minutes, or, Roxanne or Omar. Anyway, all these wonderful, amazing leaders in our community. And then I loved seeing Leslie Romanoff from the Purple, I call it the Purple School. Sorry, Leslie. I know, the Tacoma Park Cooperative Nursery School, TPCNS, that says, what is this? This is the hardest, this is like 60 Minutes. And she's got that great sense of humor. But I actually remember that 3 years ago, the previous Youth Council had some of us up here, and they asked us questions that even our most challenging community members wouldn't have the bravery to ask us on an open mic. And we were like, are you sure you want to ask that one? And so I just think it's fantastic. This is what youth bring to us. And I just want to say congratulations to the Youth Council on all the incredible things you do. It is not every day that we can even boast that we helped to pass legislation like Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. So well done, well done. And an appeal. If your youth would like to come back to council on this issue or any other, but particularly since they put the work in, our communities everywhere can be a hostile place. We will stand beside them, I am certain. We will walk them into this space. Our mayor will be a beast, I'm sure, about keeping everyone in line to respect their rights to be heard, as she does all the time. But I am positive that we can make them feel safe in this space. So if it would take a word from any of us to come be their allies, please encourage them to think about coming again.
I will make sure that they hear that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lamon.
Thank you so much for that report, and I want to especially thank you, not only because it was very, fulsome and full of really great projects, but that you did include the projects that did not get over the finish line. And that tells me, first off, that people are setting their sights very ambitiously, and I really think that that's remarkable, and they should be congratulated. And secondly, it gives us insight into where we have more work to do. I have a question for you about the participants. I think one of the really wonderful features about our Youth Council is the broad age range of eligible participants. And so do you have a sense of how many people are starting really young and then sticking with it for multiple years versus only doing this for 1 year? Are we recruiting across the age spectrum, and are we retaining people for more than 1 year so that they can benefit from what they learned in year one to try and move it forward in the subsequent years? If you have any insights on those, I'd appreciate it.
I can speak to my experience. I've only been their advisor for 2 years, but I do know that a number of members currently have served for 3 to 4 years. We also had 2 7th graders participating with us. And actually something that I really appreciated that I thought was going to be one of those behind the scenes kinds of things that an advisor has to do was to make sure that the 7th graders got to have their questions answered and voices heard as well. They were right in there. They, whenever they wanted to like make sure that their opinion was heard, they just jumped right in and they were talking to 11th graders. And I remember being very scared of 11th graders when I was in junior high. So, but as to actual data and numbers, I couldn't give you that. I could do a little research though for you if you're interested.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schlegel?
I just wanted to thank you. Sorry, I might echo.
We don't hear an echo on our
Okay.
end.
I just wanted to thank you for your approach when initiatives didn't make it across the finish line or faced obstacles, that you treated the entire process as a learning experience that they can carry forward with them. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Councilmember Westlake?
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really, really impressive and exciting to see so many different things. I will just share that ever since you showed the alien and Yeti, including the little figurines, my mind has been churning, knowing that we have an election day coming up. I don't know how much their rent has been to keep them stored wherever they are. But wondering if there's any way to engage with folks at our polling places with youth voting, but also a way to connect that with kids. I know I always go to vote with my kids and they're just kind of sitting and standing around, and I would love some kind of activity. This is not youth council specific. So, but anyway, just if, you want any creative thinking on how we could still get those out there and do some kind of voting process, I'd be happy to help.
I would be a big fan of that. And before I forget, I know that I had printed it on the slide, but just to say it out loud, we were able to do these because of the July 4th Committee's Weird and Wonderful grant. So we thank very much the July 4th Committee for accepting our grant proposal, which, by the way, they wrote a wonderful grant. So many
Thank you. Councilmember Gilbert?
Thanks, Mayor. And thank you for being there for those young men and women who are obviously well beyond their years. I had the pleasure of sitting in on a meeting with them a couple of months ago, and I mentioned, and happened to be there and was, and sat down with the subcommittee that wanted to look into the lighting for the parks and the additional hours. And it was my recommendation that they go out and speak to members of the community. So I'm flattered that they took my advice, but at the same time disappointed that they feel so discouraged, and I'm hoping that they'll bounce back. I'm sure they will. But I just wanted to also make clear for those who are listening, community, the ex officio member does not have voting rights. Is that correct?
That's
Just
correct.
so people know, but does have an opportunity to participate and has a voice in during the conversation. I was also there when they voted down the idea of the World Cup and the disappointment of those who really wanted to push forward, but they swallowed it as a part of the process. And it was special to see him in action on that day. So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, just very briefly, thank you for being there for them and helping to support them in this. And thank you to all of the youth council members for stepping up and doing all this. Every year, the council delivers. It's just so awesome to see. 10 years doesn't sound like a long time, but when I talk with other communities, I find that actually in the life of youth councils, it is.
Mhm.
And I'm really proud that we have a continued active group of youth that want to want to join and want to participate in this kind of thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Christine, again for all of your work. I'm very appreciative of the Youth Council. And thank you so much. We will continue to work in collaboration with our Youth Council going forward.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move to our voting session this evening. The first is the first reading ordinance approving FY27 budget amendment number 1. I'm going to kick off to staff to see whether or not there are any points of clarity or discussion on this item.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We do have some in the staff report, publicly posted, some further explanation of some of the more last-minute additions to this proposed budget amendment number 1. It's highlighted in the staff report, and I would like our director, Susan Chung, to walk council through what those adjustments were about, and we're prepared to answer any questions. There's also cross-reference to the tables in the budget amendment itself.
Council and Mayor, I want to point out there are actually 3 changes after the council work section on July 15. And these 3 changes are from the city clerk division. We added $90,000 in the general fund, and this is a reappropriation. Reappropriation from last year. It's a $40,000 for the temporary assistance and $50,000 for the contract. And this is to use for the unlawful restrictive covenant project. So the second item is presented by Public Works, and they added $70,000. It's also a reappropriation to the general fund for the purchase of a leaf vacuum. And this leaf vacuum was already ordered in fiscal year 26. Unfortunately, it was delivered late. So that's why we have to move the money, the budget, from fiscal year 26 to 27 to pay for it. So again, it was something that we budgeted for 26, but because of the delayed delivery, that we have to use the money in 27. The last item is the police department. They're transferring $24,000, which is a budget increase originally in the general fund for the Motorola equipment contract. And this money is moved from the general fund and to be paid for from the stop sign camera fund, because they have sufficient money in the stop sign program to pay for that additional cost. So these are the 3 items that is included in the changes for the first reading. And these changes were not in the original first work session. Okay, so because of these changes, there were some changes made to our final general fund unassigned reserve, as well as the fund balance. So these changes include an expenditure reduction of $5,000. An expenditure reduction will make our unassigned reserve balance increase, because expenditure reduction is almost similar to revenue addition. So the unassigned reserve has changed, slightly increased to $5.98 million, and bringing the reserve ratio to 18.15, where the total fund balance is close to $17 million at the end of this first budget amendment. So these are the changes. It's highlighted in yellow, and in the table also, we highlight every item that changed in yellow, as well as in the funding sources. The changes were also highlighted in yellow. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great. I do just want to make sure I'm clear on the
unlawful restricted covenants item and how it was budgeted for. I just want to make sure that I am remembering this correctly. So I thought during budget reconciliation, we included a set amount. Was that set amount split between these two categories? I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
In the fiscal year 27 budget, there was a budget included in the city manager's contract line.
Okay.
And these two items here, it is in the 26 budget and being reappropriated to 27. So they are two different things, but is with the same program.
Okay, so, yeah, because I'm looking at the budget. Services and charges total 5,000, a decrease of 40 or 90% compared to prior fiscal year. Fiscal year 26 budget includes funds for advertising related to the removal of unlawful restricted covenants.
So the restrictive covenant in the contract of the city manager was about $55,000. And here is another 90,000 being moved from fiscal year 26 to 27.
That's what I'm trying to make sure I'm
Yes.
understanding, that it's on top of.
Yes.
Yes, can I
Yes.
just provide clarity?
Yep.
So the 90,000 was in FY '26, and it was broken out 40,000 for temporary assistance and 50,000, it says contractor, but it's a newspaper. And then this year, in FY '27, we added additional 55 to help pay for legal review that we may need. So we have a total of 145 to work with in '27.
Between the two. That's what I'm trying to get a handle on, because I was like, no, I knew that we had budgeted the 95K in 26. However, that was allocated.
Yep.
And I knew we put a placeholder hoping we wouldn't need it in the 27 budget, hoping that the things in Annapolis would pass and we wouldn't necessarily need to add all of this extra money, but just in case. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm clear, because I was getting a little twisted around. Okay.
Yeah, the idea was if the bill passed, that would have allowed us to go with a banner, for example, because banner is much cheaper. Then we would have had additional money. Maybe we would not have needed all of the 55,000.
Right. Thank you for that. Any other questions, points of discussion? Okay. Seeing no more additional lights. Would someone like to move the first reading ordinance approving FY '27 budget amendment number 1?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Councilmember Hanzak, for a second. Any additional points of discussion on this item? Okay. Councilmember Lamon, is that okay, ready to vote? All right, so with that, we are virtual this evening. Would the clerk please call the roll on this one?
Councilmember Landman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Yes.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Yes.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Yes.
Councilmember Wesselek. Mayor Searcy.
Aye.
Next, we're going to vote to convene as the Stormwater Management Board. All those in favor of convening as the Stormwater Management Board, please say aye. Aye. Do you have any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstain? All right, we are the Stormwater Management Board. Now we have the first reading ordinance approving the FY '27 Stormwater Management Budget Amendment number 1. Are there any specific items related to the stormwater budget, Director Chung, that you would like to highlight?
There's no change for the stormwater budget amendment.
Great. All right. Any questions before we move this one? Okay, no worries. All right, seeing none, would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Lamon. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Any points of discussion? All right. Seeing no lights, would the clerk please call the roll on this one?
Councilmember Landman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Yes.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Yes.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Yes.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Aye.
Mayor Searcy.
Aye. All right, we're going to move to our first work session this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Chung. So this item is options to address unlawful restricted covenants.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this item here on the restrictive covenants, before I launch into the presentation, I want to thank the council members for the opportunity to brief with you all. Not everybody, but with those we were able to. And I also want to thank those who sent emails asking for clarity. We hope that the briefings and the emails provided the clarity you were seeking. I also want to acknowledge Jim Douglas, who is here from Historic Tacoma. And then just an overview. In this presentation, in this proposal, staff is seeking to provide council with a balanced approach to carrying out the task of removing the unlawful restrictive language from identified deeds and declaration of covenants. The presentation is going to take me about 10 minutes. I will zip through it and then turn it over to the mayor to open up the floor for discussion and questions. So with that, I will launch. There are 3 decision points for the mayor and council. I'm putting them up first because I want you to have these in mind as we go through the slides. The first question, the first decision point is the interpretation of Resolution 2040. In the resolution, the mayor and council directed staff to remove the unlawful discriminatory language from all deeds within the city. In our proposal, what we are saying is removing the unlawful restrictive language from those identified deeds and declaration of covenants. The second option, the second decision point is notification option. It is either Washington Post or the Daily Records with additional outreach efforts. And the third item is the assignment of the project to either Historic Tacoma, who has done a significant amount of work already, or to legal firms, outside entities who would need to do the work, need to do the research from the beginning, and they would be at a much higher price. The scope, if whoever gets assigned, the scope would encompass of making the modifications, would include the research, the modifications to the deeds and declaration of covenants tied to subdivisions as applicable. Why can't I move this? Okay. The just brief background, you guys know this, you guys have lived it for the last several years, and my apologies in advance if it's repetitious, but I'm also thinking of the viewing public. So the purpose, it's the addressing the lasting impacts of historic racial inequities, acknowledge the harm caused by discriminatory practices embedded in property records, and affirms that local government has significant roles, confront its history, and advance equity. The approach is by exercising enabling state legislation to remove unlawful discriminatory language from deeds and declaration of covenants, by engaging a third party to conduct the necessary review, research, documentation, and modification process to remove the unlawful discriminatory language. The deliverable is amended deeds and declaration of covenants covering approximately 1,200 units that have been identified containing this offensive language, and an amended document posted in public record tied to each property. Again, my apologies in advance if this is elementary, but just historical context. Deed is one of the most important documents associated with real property, as it serves as the instrument that transfers ownership from one party to another. For example, in sales transaction, deeds contain restrictive language, exclusionary language that run with the land, meaning that they continue to apply even after the property is sold. Such restrictions, such as declaration of covenants, which are typically at the subdivision level, can include easement granting, others the right to use the part of the property, dedication of public purpose, public way, and/or conditions or reservation by the grantor, the seller. This was exclusionary language that was designed to keep people of color and others based on the basis of religious and ethnicity out of certain communities. Unlawful restrictive languages were common throughout the United States in the early 20th century. While the unlawful discriminatory language were ruled illegal and unenforceable in 1948, some properties still include discriminatory language in their historic records at the property level or the subdivision or both. Just again, background, some state and city actions to date. Effective October 2025, the state of Maryland streamlined the process of removing unlawful discriminatory language by allowing counties and municipalities to do it themselves. Before, property owners could do it, and you'd have to get their signatures. It was a bit more cumbersome. This made it easier for communities like Tacoma Park to take up the project on their own. Counties and municipalities have to provide public notice. This was also a change. Before the change, communities had to identify and find each property owner, owner of record. So that was really cumbersome and significant amount of work. So this change allowed cities to publish four newspaper articles, basically notification, legal notice, 4 weeks in a paper and local newspaper of general circulation. Property owners then have 30 days before the submission of the modification to decline. Tacoma Park in 2024 adopted Resolution 2024-40, and the language in quotes is an exact lift. It's verbatim from the resolution, which says, reaffirming that restrictive covenants are illegal and commits to taking steps to address the city's history of racism by the expeditious removal of unlawful restrictive covenants from deeds associated with the residential properties within the city limits. Another action the city took was approved a budget of $90,000 that we just discussed in FY26, and then just this past year for FY27, the council approved another $55,000 to help pay for legal costs, and allocating a total of $145,000 for the project. Just a very high-level scope of work. The scope of work consists of primary two components. One is the public notification, then the other is the deeds and declaration of covenants, declaration of restrictive covenants modification. The modification component includes 5 subcomponents, which is identifying the impacted properties, identifying the restrictive covenants or the deeds containing the unlawful language, amend the deeds and the declaration of covenants, restrictive covenants as applicable by striking through the unlawful restrictive language in those documents. And then it's completing the form. It's the intake form, CC-087, and submitting the modification package, which includes the original document, the amended document, which is like the strike through, and then the completed form to the county's attorney's office for final review and execution. And then once the county attorney approves it, they then submit it to the Montgomery County Land Records, which is within the circuit court, for recording. This is just an example. This was a great suggestion that we received during the briefings. An example of what a correction or modification looks like. So this is an example of a deed, and so the struck language You can read it, but it's, so this is what it would look like. It's not a new language. It's literally striking the language that is unlawful. If there was to be an overstrike, it would just be deemed null and void anyway. Next slide, the approach, cost, and timeline. The implementation work would be assigned to a qualified third-party entity selected by the city upon mayor and council approval to conduct the necessary review, documentation, and modification process. Staff reached out to title companies, law firms, and Historic Tacoma, a local volunteer historic preservation organization, as potential entities who may be assigned the projects. We did learn that title companies do not provide the service, and in fact, they typically outsource this type of deed modifications. And through the title companies, we received recommendations of the two law firms. The cost, based on our research, ranges from $42,000 to over $500,000, depending on various factors, including the entity selection, complexity, the city's risk tolerance, and other related considerations. If the council was to direct us to move forward, the work would commence in early 2027 with an anticipated completion period of 24 to 36 months, potentially longer, again, depending on various factors. So we go back again to those decision points that we discussed earlier. So again, the interpretation of the resolution 2020-24-40, staff recommends moving forward with removing the language from all identified deeds and declarations containing such language. And this would cover about 1,200, could be less, could be more, but about 1,200 units, which is what we have been discussing for the last several years. Again, the idea here would be, it wouldn't be all deeds. A deed can, a property can be sold and resold a number of times, and sometimes the same language can be carried over into a new deed, and sometimes not. But what this would do by just going to all the identified deeds is that it would, each of those properties would have at least a recorded document that strikes the language. Notification options, it's the Washington Post or the Daily Record. In the staff report, we discussed, we reached out to the Banner, who's, they only have an online version. We also looked at Washington Examiner. The Washington Examiner wasn't that much cheaper than Washington Post. So staff recommends moving forward with the Daily Record. And in addition, we would do more outreach. A council member recommended in one of our one-on-ones reaching out, in addition to what we've said we would do, reaching out to the title companies that are local to this area so that they're aware of this also. And so we would do that as well. And then the third decision point is who to assign the project to. Staff recommends assigning the project to Historic Tacoma. Historic Tacoma has done a significant amount of work on this. It's a local volunteer-driven organization, vested interest, and they're much cheaper compared to the law firms. And with that, I turn it, oh, one more thing, sorry. Next steps are, council should provide us direction on the following, the 3 decision points, the attached resolution, and then the next step will be staff will bring a final resolution for council consideration at the next meeting, which is July 29th. So with that, I turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you very much. Can you go back to the decision point slide? So I just want to make sure that everyone's clear in terms of the distinction of the all deeds versus the all identified deeds. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear that we're talking about the most recent deed of record where the information exists, or are we talking about doing a retroactive, like all the way back? Come on up, Jim.
Hit it one more time. There you go.
It was already on, okay. So Jim Douglas from Historic Tacoma. Just a little bit of a clarification, and I guess the last time I was here, it was a prior council, so almost 2 years later, we're making some progress. So as the deputy city manager and I have been talking about this over the last several months and working through some of the complexities and finer points, one of the issues that came up is what the all deeds term means. And so just to slightly modify what the deputy city manager said, when we did the initial research, we did not look at every single property in the city of Tacoma Park. We looked at the properties where covenants are likely. And just a quick sort of historical note, this idea of restrictive covenants emerged in the early 20th century, interestingly enough, in Minneapolis and Chicago and Boston, not in other cities where you might expect it. And it was driven by the real estate industry and driven in sort of the development process. So the typical way the covenants were imposed was through subdivisions, re-subdivisions, development projects, and so on, in which they put either on individual lots or often on the whole subdivision a restrictive covenant. So the work that Montgomery County Historic Preservation Office started a few years ago on their mapping segregation project started by looking at subdivisions in Montgomery, down county, Montgomery County, and then we followed up on that work. And so our work was focused on looking at subdivisions and looking at those subdivisions that occurred in the time frame that we're interested in, which is early 20th century through mid 20th century. So those are the properties we looked at. So when we use the language in these documents here about identified ones, we're looking at those where there's the highest likelihood, as opposed to going to some of the other parts of the city where it's extremely unlikely that there would be a covenant. It's technically possible that somebody somewhere along the line could have put a one-by-one covenant on it. That would be an extremely tedious and probably not very productive set of work. So we have, I think, the 1,200 or so, depending on our final count, is where the high likelihood locations are because of the time frames in which the subdivisions are created and that use of the subdivision as the mechanism for creating the covenant as opposed to individual property owners one by one. So that's kind of the, when the deputy city manager brought to my attention recently this sort of all deeds and thinking that we were looking, that we didn't want to leave the impression that we have looked at every single property in the city of Tacoma Park. We've looked at those where there's the highest probability that there are problems and issues. So,
and so I feel like this is a loop-de-loop because one of the first approaches I thought of to address this, I said, well, why don't we just ban these in the city and force people at the point of sale to remove the title company to remove the information? I mean, you're already signing your life away when you buy a house in Tacoma Park. You're promising to never cut down a tree. You're promising to do a lot. So why not just, it's nothing wrong with it, but I'm just saying we have a lot of stuff that we require people at point of sale. And so that is unique to us. So if the desire was to say, okay, we've gone down the path of education, not really fruitful. We don't want to necessarily want to wait until everyone these properties change hands, because that could be 20, 30 years. We want to target these properties that we already know may likely have it. So that makes sense. But if we eventually as a council wanted to say, we really do want all deeds. So maybe we have this slower burn in place for those properties that were outside of the scope and the likelihood of what you all were considering. But over time, if they just so happen to be there at the point of sale, that language could be removed. So that would be a slower burn, probably be pretty cheap to do, but it would allow us to still say all deeds. It's just we're not addressing the high likelihood ones over time. We're rushing to address those now.
So I think the issue with that is that when a title search is done, and when people go back, and I'm no expert as, you know, a title company, but my understanding is when they're doing a title search on sale of a property, they're not going back to the beginning. They're going back, I don't know, 30 or 40 years or something like that. And so, as the staff report points out, these covenants ride with the property. So your deed today will say, subject to existing restrictions and covenants, okay? Every deed says that. It's a catch-all term that says, if sometime in the past, some restriction was put on this property, a racial covenant, a driveway easement, a WSSC right-of-way, anything like that, it's not necessarily, and usually is never repeated in subsequent deeds. It's covered in this catch-all language in current deeds that says subject to any covenants or restrictions that existed in the past. So our work had to go back to the beginning on each one of these to find those, because if you look at the current deed on anybody, all you will see is that catch-all language. So I think it's, from a practical standpoint, if you know, where I am up on Maple Avenue, out in the original B.F. Gilbert subdivision, which was done way before and this covenant stuff happened. If that property sold, you would never, unless somebody was really diligent about going back to the first deed from B.F. Gilbert to the first buyer and then following every deed forward, they would never see that. And the likelihood of it being there is infinitesimal, because people didn't do that people didn't impose these covenants as individuals. The covenants were imposed by developers. So I think, just to comment, Mayor, on the point that we discussed a couple of years ago about removing them at time of sale, I think a practical problem with that is, how do you enforce that? We could publish a register, here's all the places we know of covenants, but then it would be incumbent upon the real estate agents, the real estate attorneys, and so on, to pay attention to that. And if they didn't, what do you do about that? So I think accomplishing the goals that the staff report laid out in terms of making a community commitment to racial equity and addressing the wrongs of the past is really fundamentally best done by the city saying, let's acknowledge the past and let's deal with that, rather than having it bits and pieces. So
Thank you for that. Oh, go right ahead.
I was just going to say that enforcement would be the hardest part of doing the point of sale. We would be relying on people doing what they should be doing. And as Jim pointed out, you know, they're doing these, and they're not, the likelihood of them going back to previous records they just don't have a vested interest in doing it.
So in theory, what we would be talking about is all identified deeds based on information provided from the county.
Well, basically,
Yeah.
the research work that we've done over the last few years to find where the highest probability are, and again, it's these, just a little bit more detail. So started looking at subdivisions, and then you pick up a few names. So there's a couple people whose names appeared. They did small sales, and maybe subdivided a couple properties, and when they did that, they put a covenant on it. So then I took those names and said, well, I wonder if they did it there, maybe they did it someplace else. So I checked all of the work that they did. So that's how we, find a few odds and ends. But it's really these, large scale property transactions that were done. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the risk, I know that you explained the cost differential, but also highlighted the risk associated with the varying approaches of implementation from Historic Tacoma versus an outside legal firm. Can you explain what some of those legal risks are and what has been done to mitigate them with the recommendation that you are proposing with Historic Tacoma?
Sure. So there are a couple of risks. One is again, not having identified all the properties with the restrictions, but again, I think Jim just explained the approach. The other risk is the potential for overstriking, so overcorrecting, in which case, if that were to happen, it could potentially, it doesn't necessarily challenge the underlying ownership or transfer of ownership, but it could delay somebody from selling their unit because somebody has to clarify that, oh, they didn't mean to strike out this language. So that's where that risk would be. So if Historic Tacoma is to be assigned this project, Historic Tacoma has or will be procuring indemnification insurance coverage. It's not indefinite. It has a term, but that's how we're proposing to mitigate.
And so, and what is the term?
So we looked in when staff asked us, what coverage we have and what coverage we could get, we talked to our broker, so we can get something that's called errors and omissions coverage, which is over and above our regular directors and officers liability coverage. And that covers, there's an annual performance period. So my understanding is that there's a period under which from the time the incorrect action was taken, there's a limited period of 7 or 8 years or something, I don't know the exact number, in which somebody can challenge that. Okay, it's sort of a statute of limitations type thing. So what we can do is we can get coverage for the period of performance while we're doing the work, which ought to be far less than the time that's in here, but we don't know exactly what we're going to find. So and then we can buy what's called tail coverage, which then has at a somewhat reduced rate for a few more years after that, continues to keep us covered, which I don't think takes us to that full period in which somebody could challenge us, but it comes very close. And I think, I understand the concerns that have been raised in the discussions over the last year about this. I personally think that it's a pretty straightforward process, and the chances of errors being made are pretty limited. And I think it wasn't built into the presentation just now, but there's going to be some oversight of the work that we would do to, sort of spot check and so on to make sure that our work is correct. So I think we're doing a reasonable job of minimizing risk for something that, these covenants are not enforceable anyway, and so we're taking what's largely a symbolic and sort of statement of policy and perspective rather than actually modifying the significant part of the deed. So I think we're in good shape on that, but that's the insurance that we would procure.
Great, thank you very much. And
Madam Mayor, if I can just add one more other thing. So part of the $55,000 that you all approved this past budget season was to allow for spot check sample size review by attorneys. So that's another built-in, built-in safety valve. They wouldn't look at everything, but they would look at sample. And this is the way that another Maryland community, Washington Grove, approached it. It was all volunteer driven. They had their city attorney do spot review. They have much less unit count, but that's how they approached it. So, and again, the state statute, the law says if you struck more language than you're supposed to, it's automatically invalid. So.
If I may, your original question was what's driving the cost difference. I will say also, per the earlier citizen comment, we're not charging $200, $250 an hour. So there's a big issue right there.
Great, thank you very much. Councilmember Lamon.
I thank you very much for all the work that went into this, and I am good with all the staff recommendations myself. I just want to flag, in discussing just now the potential risk. The risk is not that we strike this provision, it's that we accidentally strike something that goes beyond the racially restrictive covenant language. And, you know, I know, for example, in my own deed, which had one of these in the subdivision, the same sentence that had the racially restrictive covenant language also forbade gambling and the use of drink on my property. So, I mean, it's all within the same sentence. So you can see why there is an issue there, but it's not about the striking of the covenant. It's about accidentally striking something else. So that doesn't change my view that this is adequately protective. I did just want to also indicate, it seems like there are several people that will be looking at this before it goes into the recorder of deeds. In fact, the final stage is conducted by the county attorney's office, correct? So that even if we accidentally were to make a mistake, which I'm sure is very improbable because Historic Tacoma is getting ready to be very careful, there would be several other opportunities before it goes into the final record for somebody to identify and catch the mistake, in addition to the spot checking that you're proposing to do. Is that right?
That is correct. So, I think what gave us a little pause is in the form, the modification form. There's little tiny print there that says, and I'm paraphrasing, while the county attorney is signing off on this, if there are any mistakes, it goes back to the municipal government. So
Actually, and this, I was not aware of this when we last talked about this a year or so ago, and learned in the course of our discussions over the last few months. Actually, the state law, at the very end of the state law, after it does all the substantive stuff about who can remove them and request them and so on, there's a, oh, by the way, is the very last line of the law that says neither the county attorney nor the court clerk are liable for any mistakes made, which strikes me personally as odd when the county attorney is signing the bottom of the form saying, I've reviewed this and find it legally sufficient. Then the state law says, well, you can make a mistake and we're not going to hold you responsible for that.
Well,
So,
it might refer to personal financial liability as opposed to, you know.
yeah. So anyway, I think one of the reasons it's taken longer than we thought it would take to get to this point tonight is that we began to uncover more and more of these little subtleties and nuances that we had to kind of work through and manage as the deputy city manager said, sort of a balanced thread the needle approach to get to the right place on this.
So, Madam Mayor, I thank you, Jim. There are a number, because there's a desire to get this through next week when we meet for the final time before the break. I just want to flag that in looking at the draft resolution, I did identify a handful of clarity and typographical things that I think should be corrected, none of which I think are substantive at all, which I could maybe just share with the staff. I could go through them if you want, or I could just share them. But anyway.
You can, if you wouldn't mind, sending them to Deputy City Manager Hupty, and if you also wouldn't mind just copying the council on the edits, and then that way we're all aware of them.
Okay. Is it okay if I resort to photocopying the handwritten version?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I'll work with the city clerk on doing that. None of them are substantive, but they're just for clarification purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hanzat.
Thank you so much for all the work that's gone into this and for continuing to champion this Historic Tacoma. And Mayor, thank you. I think it's just really important. I happened to have the opportunity to go through the African American Museum just today with Teach for America, and was reading about Black Code after the in our history, in our nation's history. And if you haven't been there lately, it's quite, it's a good reckoning about why this is so very, very important, because as we can see, there's an erosion right now of a lot of things that we always thought were sacrosanct. But anyway, I know we all know that. So I too support the all identified deeds from what I understand. I would support, frankly, the lowest cost option for Washington Post or Daily Record. I'm not sure whether it will really reach our people. Or maybe it's whichever one is most politically comfortable for us. I won't pretend to be an expert on those things. I did appreciate the commenter earlier tonight from Ward 2. I didn't catch his name. And I would strongly support the assignment of the project to Historic Tacoma. I do have one question. The mayor asked about risk-related questions, but also, could you just comment quickly whether you have attorneys on your board, or are you an attorney?
I am not an attorney. We do have an
Okay.
attorney on our board who has reviewed these kinds of things. So,
And would
yes.
be involved in this process as
involved,
well?
yes.
Again,
Right.
no personal liability
No,
implied. I'm
right.
just curious.
Yes,
Okay.
and he actually was very helpful in guiding us towards this errors in emission policy, which is, so
Yeah.
he's a retired general practice attorney, so he's got a
Okay.
lot of experience in this. So yeah, that's fine. I will say just quickly that I think we anticipate in it, the law requires us to publish in a newspaper of record, but there are many other ways that we can also publicize this too, in the city's website, the city newsletter, our own outreach, and so on. So I think there will be many opportunities for people who don't read either the Washington Post classifieds or the Daily Record classifieds to learn about this project and process that we're going to follow. So for getting the word out, kind of thing. So.
Is there any, and this is, I think, more for the city staff, is there any reason that we wouldn't send out 1,200 mailers to the households in question just to make sure it gets right to the address we have on file, or is it difficult to get those addresses from the get-go?
So this is where we were
Yeah.
2 years ago.
No, I
which
do
is the-
recall. I'm
where
just-
the
if
state
you could
law said
remind
you had
me.
to do a first-class letter. And so the publishing in the newspaper of record was the alternative to sending out a first-class letter to everybody.
To meet the legal requirement,
Right.
yes, but in terms of just attempting to blanket the notification process, honestly, I think I'm more interested in notifying people in the name of, I'm going to call it racial reconciliation, to get people to pay attention because it's addressed to them, seems important to me, not really for any legal reasons. And I just, is it expensive? Is
Well,
it difficult? I know we might get to the wrong person, et cetera, but.
I'll defer to the staff on
Yeah.
expense and so on.
Yeah.
I will say it's possible to do because we will need, in order to do the work, we will need to, right now we've identified the legal descriptions, the subdivision, the block and the
Yes.
lot. We've not yet associated a name or a street address with those. In order to do the work that's ahead of us, we will need to do that. So we will have, at some point, a comprehensive list of the legal description of the property that appears in the deed, the owner of record, and the address of that person. And so it's feasible to send a letter to each of those people. Whether you want to do that or not, that's not my call, that's your collective call.
Right.
on that, so.
So I will just remind council that the original bill language that was passed included requiring us to, I believe, send certified letters to all of the impacted households. And because of the process, it would have required a couple of passbacks. And we determined that that would be extremely cost prohibitive to do. And the result of that was going back to Annapolis, in which I testified, to get that language removed from the state law requiring the exchange of the certified mailers, which was cost prohibitive. So then it was replaced with, okay, you can post it in a newspaper. And then this session, we went through the process of trying to not force us to have to go through places like the Washington Post. Can we just post it on a website, post it somewhere else? That failed. But the reason we went down this path was because sending certified mail and interacting with someone via mail to reach a resolution or have them respond and then send a follow-up was extremely cost prohibitive.
Right. No, so I'm 100% aware of it. Thank you for reminding the public and anyone who wasn't. I was like I said, I think the value to me, it clearly would be much more complex if that, which is why we didn't go that avenue for the legal reasons. But if a further goal is to help make individual property owners more aware of the work that we've done as a city to change things, to transform things, knowing that, frankly, many of the property owners who are there today may not really be fully aware of what's in their deeds. I think there's great value in that if it wasn't a big lift, and knowing that many of them wouldn't reach the intended recipient because maybe they really aren't the person, maybe they're not alive, maybe they're not the person who owns the deed anymore, maybe they aren't living at that address, what, you know, the many reasons, but many of them would reach them and in a more personalized way that I think would have value. Anyway, I'd be interested in knowing if it wasn't certified mail, if it was basic, straight up mail, and at the end of the day, we had the addresses, whether that's something that we might consider doing for the purpose of, you know, community education and awareness and really building that bridge all the way to its destination as much as possible. Anyway, that's just a further thought that I have that just came upon me as I was looking at all of this and what's the purpose of doing all of this. And I think that covers. Oh, I did. Can I just, in case I use this statistic for later, in case anybody has questions. So the total cost of the process that we're going through as we see it now over the 2 years, or the 2 years that we imagine, would be about $145,000. So I just did a quick back of the envelope, which would be about $120, which is nothing per property. Does that sound like about right? If someone should ask, what are we spending on this? I think it's worth an infinite amount of money, but obviously there will be questions, and I would like to be able to answer them coherently.
So that is what we're
Okay.
anticipating at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, may I just answer the question regarding the sending out letters?
Yeah.
So sending out the letters, A, it would be costly, and B, the danger we deal with that is not identifying the correct or not identifying all of those folks that have ownership stake. So the law, as Madam Mayor mentioned, the law was changed to make that easier, to streamline it, so that we just post it on a newspaper. And we actually believe that we would do a better job than the Washington Post, even if we were to go with the Washington Post. You know, you could argue that readership isn't what it used to be, and really think outside of land use attorneys, you know, real estate folks, regular folks aren't going to probably look at the legal notices. So we are actually counting more on the city manager's weekly report to council, on the Jim's website, Historic Tacoma's website, our newsletter. We're relying on those more to inform residents than anything else, than any other medium.
If I could just see, I don't know if my meaning though, if either I'm missing something or I haven't communicated clearly. I am suggesting that this would be a pathway, if it's not that much to send basic mail, knowing that there would be a lot of inaccurate, you know, or not all the people, et cetera, that this would have nothing to do with the legal side of things, really. That this would simply be, hey, this, even after this has been done. This is why. This is the history behind this. This is why, you know, this is what it looked like. This is what it looked like. This is what it looks like now, or something. And then I don't know whether there's liability involved in doing something like that. But if it could be done without any liability risk, it would be an interesting pathway to me to getting more directly. I think many people who we might like to reach, to really more deeply reflect on these issues rather than just seeing a blanket statement in the paper. I think it could be somewhat transformative, frankly. I, as a white person who owns a home in this city that happened to have been redlined, this has all been very new for me to learn about restrictive covenants and the role that they've played during my lifetime. And I think it is deeply important that we really go deep on these issues and not just sort of gloss over it, particularly when we're taking the time to invest in this as a part of our racial reconciliation process as a city.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and just if I can add clarification, so the publication that we would put, is actually, it's the street address, and, a brief description of what we're doing, and it's, we're probably gonna do it by block, so it might say, impacted properties include, Maple Avenue, blocks 5,000 to, 7,000. That's what the notice would be. And then on our website, and which we are required to do per the law, post it on the website, the notice on the website. And then the city manager's report, for example, it would say, the city manager would say, oh, City of Tacoma Park has engaged blah, blah, and we will be undertaking this, and the property owners will have 30 days to reject or object to the modifications. So those are the kind of notices that would go. But I hear you.
Yeah, and I hear you too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think after hearing Councilmember Honzak, it might be useful for us to estimate or to include a cost for a one-time, once we have the actual addresses, a one-time information mailer, not in any way related to what was legally required to do, because that would have just, like, that's a whole different thing. Like, sending people forms and all of that just adds to the bulk. But if we could send one mailer to the impacted households that would simply state your home has been identified as part of blah, 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 and there will be modifications made to your deed to remove restricted covenants language. This is what it is. If you have additional questions, please contact Historic Tacoma, City of Tacoma Park. And then that way, I don't know if that would be useful or not, because then you might draw people into where they actually
So
do it themselves.
again, just speaking to the
Yeah.
feasibility as opposed to whether it's a good idea or not, I'm not going to take a position on that. From a feasibility standpoint, we will have a list of addresses. It's somewhere between probably 1,000 and 1,200 at this point. So you can multiply that number times whatever a first-class postage stamp is, and the cost of a little bit of paper envelopes. If it was a generic statement that said, dear property owner or whatever, that would be, you could just stick one of those in everyone. If it was, dear, Sam and Mary Jones at XY, then you're going to start talking about cost, because then each one of those pieces of paper would have to be individually produced and put in the right envelope and everything. So a generic would be, from a feasibility standpoint, relatively easy to do. Whether and how to do it, I think there's some pros and cons on that. I understand Councilmember Honzak's rationale, and I'd be happy to talk about it at some point, whether that's something that's worth doing. I will just say, it will take a while to if and when you approve moving forward, then we've got some work to do in terms of an actual agreement, and then we've got to get some work to do from, ramping up the project. So it will be, some months into next year before we really have detailed information, at which point that conversation could be had with whoever wants to have a conversation about whether it would make sense, and when in the process it would make sense to move forward on that. So yeah, I think it's something that can be talked about in the future if you want to talk about it.
Excellent.
Madam Mayor, if I can just, before, just to manage expectations, I do want to run this by the city attorney to make sure that it doesn't violate anything. So before I commit, can I get back to you guys on that one? Okay. I'm risk averse.
No, you're not. These options are all full of risk.
Well, some levels of risk.
Councilmember Devala.
Yeah, just very briefly, I support all three of the staff recommendations. I agree that more outreach beyond the ones that have been identified should be explored. And I want to thank Historic Tacoma in particular for your persistence over the past couple of years in hanging in there till we got as far as we are now, and to the staff for working on this. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. And basically ditto to what Councilmember DeBala said. I agree with the three staff recommendations. Thank you for the staff working on it. Thank you so much to Historic Tacoma.
Thank you very much. All right. Councilmember Schlegel, I'm sorry, I did not see your hand.
Thank you. Thank you to Deputy City Manager Abte and also to Douglas. I agree with all the recommendations. And I just had one suggestion and one quick question. My suggestion is, in light of the recent thread of conversation, maybe since we already mailed a newsletter to all addresses, we could serve the educational goal of this by doing a headline once the project is done saying, did your property have a restrictive covenant? Look it up. And then we could publish maybe across 2 pages of the newsletter, each address or each block as needed. And my question is just to make sure when the strike-throughs are done for when a strike-through is done for each property, will it be done to the most recent version of the deed on which that restrictive covenant appeared?
That's so. Let me go back again to say the covenant. I won't say always, but I will say 99.9% of the time, the covenant only appears once, and it occurs in the first deed that when essentially the developer sold it to either the developer created a subdivision and covenanted everything in the subdivision, or they sold the individual properties. So the covenant language appears there, and then subsequently, every deed after that says subject to existing covenants. So we need to go back to that first deed where it appears, which is really the first deed in the subdivision or the sale. And the example that was provided both as the attachment to the presentation and then the Washington Grove example that was in the package, you will see that I think some of the language is blocked out on that, but the attachment is there, the Washington Grove one, you can see the attached covenant language is struck through, and that would be at the time and whenever Washington Grove did this when they were done in Washington Grove, which is out of 30s or 20s or something, that's when that deed was. So it would not be the deed that you have today, it would be the deed where that covenant appeared the first time in the 20s or 30s or 40s. Is that
Yes. Okay.
clear?
Thanks for the
Okay.
clarification.
Okay. Yeah. And then I would, just to be clear, what that, every time a property is, there's a transaction on that property, that action is recorded. So both sales, which are deeds, but also mortgages are recorded in the property records, and it's part of the chain of title of that property. This struck covenant adds to that chain of title. So it gets recorded as part of the land of the record of that property. So anybody going and looking at, doing a title search and working backward would see explicitly in 2027 and 2028 that property, that covenant was restricted. So it will be very explicit to anybody looking at a modern deed or a modern property record that covenant has been struck. So you don't have to go back in time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing no more lights, I just want to thank our staff and Historic Tacoma for all of the work that you all have done to get us to this point. I am in support of the recommendations by staff, but I do think there's some clarification that's needed in the resolution. I'll provide you all with some language to make some of the points that were raised tonight clearer. And definitely look forward to getting this thing done. It's been a long time coming. Multiple trips to Annapolis by multiple people. So we are excited to see this move forward and look forward to bringing it back for a council vote next week. All right. So we're going to move to our next item, which is implementation of a Community Connectors program.
Hello, hello. Oh, there we go. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. We are back for another week in Community Connectors. A little bit of recap from last week's meeting, last week's work session, and a work session tonight on the resolution regarding the potential option for implementing Community Connectors program. So I want to just start us off by doing a quick revisit to what some of the discussion was about in last week's work session. One of the major topics, we were joined by Lourdes Aceves from National League of Cities, highlighting the city's participation and progress through the Community Engagement Academy through the National League of Cities. I talked about the identified emerging priorities and recommended related objectives and strategies that could be addressed in the Community Connectors program. Highlighted that outreach for some of the original program objectives related to housing, social services, economic development matters is already occurring through existing staff. We proposed the recruitment of a contractor to provide necessary staff capacity to implement recommended objectives and strategies, and suggested some next steps for council direction. Based on the feedback that we received in the July 15th work session, we wanted to just highlight some of the feedback that we heard. Just as a little quick note, these were comments that we heard and do not necessarily represent a consensus from the council. But one topic that we heard in the feedback was revising the position description to something that mirrors something like change management, procuring a contractor to train city staff with public-facing roles on more impactful community engagement strategies, evaluate the city's current engagement practices with the community and suggesting new and improved methods, developing appropriate metrics and key performance indicators for a community connectors program specifically, and assessing the progress in community connectors program and recommendations on next steps regarding how how to continue post-contractor. So one of the other things that we heard was continuing ongoing community engagement. That includes housing, social service, economic development. We heard from council that we wanted to work within the staff's current capacity, or some council members to work within staff's current capacity, utilizing training and best practice and strategies to be more effective in the community engagement that we do in the city. One of the other things we heard was the need to articulate council's role in community engagement, as well as the focus on addressing the needs of those historically underserved or hard to reach groups. So also based on feedback, we are offering a revised contractor role. We're proposing, a revised contractor role. We are proposing an 18-month assignment for a contractor with a narrower scope of work. The compensation, in order to better attract a qualified candidate, we are proposing a rate of $100,000 a year, which would total $150,000 over 18 months. This contractor in the narrower scope of work would work collaboratively with the city to conduct internal staff training, evaluate the current community engagement practices, collaborate with staff to propose and implement new community engagement practices, and expand engagement practices with our various community organizations that are doing great community engagement work already, and have that pre-established trust, develop civic education efforts, and create metrics for this specific program. And then we are also proposing the contractor would then provide recommendations for continuity beyond the 18-month scope of work. So to go into some additional details on the revised project scope and some potential deliverables, the first major point that we want to address through this project and the revised role of the contractor is training city staff in public-facing roles on more impactful practices and strategies. A potential deliverable is increased capacity for staff for effective interdepartmental collaboration and outward community engagement practices. A second point that we want to address is evaluating the city's current engagement practices and suggesting new and improved methods for conducting community engagement. So among what staff are currently doing, can a contractor come in, work collaboratively with those staff members, and propose new and improved methods and techniques to better reach, especially those historically underserved residents. A potential deliverable would be a report highlighting city's engagement practices and recommendations for long-term sustainability of those practices, implementation of new techniques for community engagement, as well as best practices, and appropriate metrics and performance indicators for determining the success and progress of community engagement practices. A third item in the project scope of this revised contractor position and project over the 18 months would be to identify and support community organizations to encourage participation in a community organization network such as Providers Council. So helping the city identify organizations that may not currently be part of a community organization network like the Providers Council, inviting them to the table. A potential deliverable would be an expanded network of community organizations that represents a broader portion of the community, such as tenant associations, grassroots groups, and religious organizations, and the like. Also, another deliverable or another project scope item would be continuing the ongoing community engagement work with the current staff capacity, utilizing those new best practices and strategies to be more effective in the engagement. Some deliverables could be operationalize best practices for city staff and staff that are trained in effective engagement with the community for those city initiatives. A fifth project item in the project scope that we're proposing is researching and proposing opportunities for civic education efforts with the community. This deliverable would be the guiding of an implementation of civic education programs that could lead to an increased number of residents, especially those historically underserved residents, to be provided with the skills and knowledge to be able to better navigate local government services. Ideally, this would then allow those residents to be more effectively access resources which meet their daily needs. Some examples could be food, clothing, legal aid. We'd want to hear from those residents to develop civic education programs that best meet their needs and best allow them to access those. And then this civic education could lead these residents to be more active participants in civic life. A sixth item is that Council will foster relationships among city staff and community groups, broaden the city's outreach with residents, providing city with feedback on engagement practices and assisting with civic education efforts. Recognizing Council's relationship with the community, we want to be able to leverage that Council's reach and be able to extend our community engagement efforts with our council members. Potential outcome would be better inform residents about the resources available to them, engagement practices improving, and residents benefiting from the perspectives and expertise of council members, especially in those civic education efforts. Finally, beginning to develop metrics and key performance indicators that will help us measure the impact of our community engagement practices. And so the deliverable would be the city's measurement of those community engagement activities, and then taking the metrics that we have and implementing improvements based on the results. And then at the end of the 18-month period, before the 18-month period, this contractor, along with city staff, would present regular reports to council highlighting progress, key takeaways, and the need to improve community engagement practices along with a report at the end of the 18-month period. So there is a resolution before you today, and next steps for council would then include questions and discussion on the proposed resolution and the revised slides. And in the resolution, we ask council to direct staff to proceed with the proposed scope of work, direct staff to carry over $150,000 in allocated general funds from FY26 to 27, and directing staff to recruit a contractor. And that is the end. So now I'll open up the floor for discussion, comments, questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, thank you for this. I didn't hear last week, and I didn't hear you say now, that there's really a lot of disagreement on the council about what we want to do and why we want to do it. It's a question of how. And so last week, we were talking about a temporary contract employee to facilitate this work. And this week, we're more hands-off, a contractor to focus a little more on building it into the, if I've got you right, building it into the existing staff rather than adding a temporary staff person. So those are two choices about how we go ahead. But I'm not hearing a lot about whether we should, like, we don't need to reach out to people who have been underserved and are not well connected to civic life. I'm not hearing that. So, so I am personally comfortable with this. I think some of the verbs, like research and report, are a little contractor-ish for me. And I'd prefer, identify, build in. I like train. I like evaluate and suggest improved methods, So for me, there's some language that I might play with to get it a little more activist. But I still personally still like the idea. I am curious about the thinking behind increasing the funding, because when I asked this privately, my impression was, well, you're going to pay a contractor, therefore you have to pay contract fees and all this other stuff, but that's actually not it, right? So what were the thoughts behind going to the $100,000? Because it wasn't hire an expensive consulting firm. It was something else.
Right. Yes, thank you for your comments and earlier your questions and observations to staff. We heard concerns, staff heard concerns expressed by some council members at the last meeting, the last discussion we had last week with respect to whether $75,000, which was the initial concept, would be adequate to attract a contractor for the amount of work that is being contemplated in various ways. So we thought about that. We felt that, yes, perhaps a larger sum would do the job better. That, of course, we're working within the parameters of what council has budgeted, so that's why that would take that to 18 months with an opportunity to reassess at some point shy of that. But in order to recruit is the quick answer for why in the first year, and basically the basis for the contract would be on the basis of $100,000 a year. I would say to your other comment, which we appreciated hearing, we really tried as staff to strike a balance. We understand that while there is a very big mission and an important mission here, there's also some limitations with respect to funds. And we want to, and a desire to not necessarily just add permanent staff. So we're trying to find a middle ground that accomplishes a lot of these things. One of your concerns, I believe I heard you mention a moment ago, was about whether this position would be more of a consultant than a worker, so to speak. And that is not our intention. We don't use the word consultant here purposefully. A contractor coming on at, with this amount of funds, this is somebody working all week long, every week. And this is working with staff, working with residents, working with stakeholder groups, trying to help build networks. We see this as somebody who would, in many respects, just be working shoulder to shoulder with all of the parties that I just mentioned, not sitting back and writing reports and just doing more pure consultant kind of things. I think there is some review of, for example, our current engagement practices that would be very prudent for us to do, because I think we need to sort of take measure of what we're doing presently, and it doesn't hurt to have some outside set of eyes look at that and say, well, you're doing this well, you're doing that, this not so well, and maybe there's some things you aren't even doing that you could be doing or should be doing, and it gets to best practices and other things. So some level of assessment is a good place to start. but that is not the sum total by any means of the type of work that staff is envisioning for a contractor. As we say in the report, revised contractor role details includes, and we don't get into all details here, but we say expand engagement with community organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the manner in which you do that is not for the contractor to come in and say, staff, you should do more of that. It's actually, rolling up their sleeves and working alongside of staff and those that particularly do engagement presently, but to work then with these outside groups, trying to make a special effort to focus on those who have been underserved or hard to reach historically, but to really do some field work in terms of understanding, why are they hard to reach, and why have they not been involved in civic life or knowledgeable about civic affairs to the extent that they are, and try to be sensitive and inquisitive about what they need, what needs to be done, and try to arrive at some honest-to-goodness solutions for some of those things, and come back ultimately to the mayor and council with recommendations, but also we're going to think there's going to be some common sense things that could be perhaps implemented rather quickly and efficiently, just in the course of the city doing its business. Maybe there's some things we could do better, some things we could do differently. Maybe there's some practices that are ineffective that we should stop doing. So all of that would be a big part of how the time is spent by the contractor in our view.
Yeah, so if I make three things really quickly. So I appreciate that you heard what folks said about the deliverables, and if, because whoever it is, and they're not there after 2 years or a year and a half, what's left. I appreciate that. Second thing, a couple of the points beg the question of who's going to pick it up when the person leaves. So continue expanding the ongoing community engagement work, supporting the community organizations. That those are things that somebody else would have to pick up. And I think you alluded to there are existing staff who are doing this kind of work as part of their job. Maybe they're not doing it as effectively as they could, and maybe they're available to, but that's just something that's hanging.
Yeah, we imagine doing an assessment at a certain point to say, to what degree, could staff just kind of run with a football, so to speak, at that point.
Okay.
And in conjunction with our partners in the community. It doesn't need to be exclusively city staff. But that would be an assessment to come, and ultimately a potential budgetary decision to make by council, at a later date as we get further into the program, and we've got some. That's why we emphasize the wisdom of having periodic reports to council, so that you have ongoing information about what we're working on, what type of results we think we're seeing, and frankly, we could very much use council as a sounding board for all of that information.
So which leads to my third point, which was just to remind folks that we actually had another model well, we had more than one, but the one before this was to identify a nonprofit community organization in the community and basically turn this over to them. And that didn't work out with that particular group. So we have been through a number of trying to find the right approach. But again, but we know we need to do this.
I'm sorry, if I may just add too, I
Yes.
think one of the major points that we heard last week as well, and rightly so, was the concern if you have someone starting to go out of the community on a temporary basis, doing that direct outreach, and then you leave, that could actually cause more harm.
Yep.
And in the trust. So I think what we try to do with this project scope is take it back and think about how we can work with the city staff and the other community organizations to build those internal capacities. Focus on it. It does mirror a lot of what was talked about last week in the kind of internal alignment piece. Building that, focusing on the internal capacity, get the ball rolling, and so we can see how city staff can improve what they're currently doing and have this person work collaboratively with them, but have city staff and our different community organizations be the ones who are acting as those community liaisons. So the people who we can more astutely say they are going to be interacting on a longer term basis and having those related ties and may already have those ties, have them do the work.
And then my last point, I promise this is my last point. One of the things you heard last week was focusing on the needs of residents who are historically underserved or hard to reach. Building that in even more would I think help focus the proposal and also focus it on what we need. But also it would really focus the proposal to an area that we're already committed to in terms of racial equity, and that might be a very nice blend. We sort of talked about that last week, especially you, Councilmember Honzak, but it didn't quite get fleshed out. So thank you. I'll let somebody else talk.
Thank you, Councilmember Dabala. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. I feel I'm starting to feel more comfortable with the direction of travel. So I really thank you for hearing the council. That means a lot to me to feel heard. In particular, I particularly appreciated your verbal articulation just now about, because I was going to compliment you, but I like hearing you say it in your own words. I feel that message has resonated with you and you've reflected on the fact that it might not be very sustainable for this person to be the outward-facing presence. So I wasn't able to feel that 100% in your other language, but you've got it. That makes me feel more comfortable, and I think that that's important. So I think that one way that the verbiage and perhaps the thought process could be tweaked to make it even more effective. It would be even more effective if some of the outcomes that you've listed on your slides were a little bit further along the pathway of what I'd call deliverables to the city. So that the person who fills this role, for one thing, is really clear, and the people who are engaging with them on staff understand what is their mandate. Because if we want sustainability, we've got to have a vision for what that's going to look like. So I mean, for one thing, I would maybe move point 2 up to point 1, because you can't train city staff before you've evaluated. So the evaluation process, I mean, hopefully, I don't think it would be a good use of resources personally for them to spend an excessive amount of time doing an evaluation, because I think all of us would like to see the rubber hit the road as much as possible. And as Manager DeSpirito said, you know, we want to, sorry, that's distracting. There was some radio for those who can't hear. That we would want to have the person really look at different metrics maybe and information we already have to say maybe this is pragmatically a good place to start and not a good place to start. We might want to get rid of this and take that. But anyway, so starting with the evaluation, maybe even going department by department, but where even within each department there could be some specific metrics that this person can focus on creating, even for sort of like new methods will be adopted by each department to, increase and improve, make their engagement reach further to new audiences, to reach at least 2 new audiences, to blah, 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 something where each department holds some kind of tangible deliverables that they would be working towards. And I'm looking at the cover sheet, if that's by any chance what you guys are discussing. And then also, I want to be, this is linguistics, but again, I think it's really important that this person has a strong mandate from upper level management. Again, it says evaluate the city's current engagement practices with the community and suggest new and improved methods. I personally would like to see this person go well beyond suggesting. It would be recommending and then supporting the institutionalization of during this time period. And that is partially going to include training. But I think if you had some metrics around what that institutionalization would look like and that each department holds themselves accountable to that, that would go far to helping this be more, having some meat on the bones and keeping the person from spending too much of their time doing the evaluation part and you might, for example, want them to create, as they go around to the community, I think your department might want to have them help you build out your database, your address book for the new community organizations. Who's the point of contact? Naming that person. What's the best way to reach them? Those would be work then that you don't have to do later, I would think, in your department that may not exist now, and very, very tangible. Anyway, so I know those are not in the form of questions, but that's my primary feedback, and I thank you also for putting the council in. I think we can help refine that just a little bit more, maybe, about not making it just that we're a sounding board, that we are a channel, that you can use, a two-way channel, and figuring out how to leverage that appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. I just wanted to share my perspective. I really appreciate that I can feel that this as a position feels much more aligned with it could be a short-term thing. I think there's definitely a few places where I'm not really sure where it would fit into current staff, particularly the civic education programs, but it might depend on what that is. But a lot of these I can kind of think, okay, if our list goes from 50 to 75, that staff can manage that going forward, you know what I mean? But if it's some kind of new program, who is driving that feels like more something that a staff person needs to own. But generally, I'm supportive of this, and I think this could be a good way to kind of improve what we're doing.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Thank you so much for the work that you all have done over the last week or so to kind of clarify the role. Because one of the concerns I had was I felt like we were kind of yo-yoing. And I understand that contractors can sit alongside you and do work alongside you. But I do think that it is, in this particular case, where the role would be, air quotes, a new role that is only a temporary role, but should have a long-standing work stream that's embedded throughout our organization. It was really hard for me conceptually to have it so that it's just a 2-year contract term, but the person is doing work that's similar to what a full-time person would do. And so what would happen after the fact? So I do think that you all have gone into the contractor piece a little more strongly, and I appreciate that. I agree with Councilmember Honzak that some of the things that are labeled as deliverables are actual goals. So, training city staff with public-facing roles on more meaningful, impactful engagement practices and strategies. If someone's here for only 18 months, how many trainings are you expecting them to do? Is the goal to hold at least 5 trainings over the next 18 months on topics of their choice, or for them to develop a training program and what that looks like? And then the goal, or the outcomes, I said goals, it's outcomes. The outcomes of those trainings, you hope down the line, is increased capacity for effective interdepartmental collaboration. So your consultant, your contractor would need to know that part of their job is to develop a training plan for staff. They would need to get that thing together pretty darn quick, because they only got 18 months, get it approved by everybody, and actually start training folks. Similarly, identifying community organizations and encourage participation. So there's one of the things that I do want us to make sure that we are having this person do, that we're not having them do, and that is put in a lot of time into an infrastructure that already exists and not devote enough time to creating infrastructure that's missing. So you have the Providers Council, which is building up, and we have lots of nonprofit organizations within the city that's constantly applying for our grant programs and things like that. So we have a clear avenue to direct people to the Providers Council. What we don't have a clear avenue to get people engaged in, and that is in our multifamily housing, in what was the original kind of purpose, which was to try to direct people in kind of building that social service safety net within the community so that there's points of entry where people can go. I think the Providers Council can do that because they often have these windows and they can help with that. But I think it is also important that our staff, like in HCD, are also fully aware of and know how to bring information in an engaged way into the buildings. Or if there's some other, not Providers Council, but other type of entity, like bringing together leaders from various tenant associations, and then using them, like just trying to encourage creativity where it comes to gaps in like gaps in a network that we know we need, right? So some of our folks that are tenant advocates and on boards and things, they do talk to one another, but not all of them. And I think it probably would be useful to kind of bring them together so they have a network and then kind of know one another and they get information and they can share and they can talk to one another. But that would be an HCD thing. So I just want to make sure, like this is a such as, but I want to make sure that we're not, when we're talking about identifying and supporting community organizations, that we don't inadvertently continue to put a lot of the 18 months worth of time and planning into organizations and networks that are kind of already solidified, but we make sure that there's some time, that this person has some time to really fill the gap that we know is missing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and actually, I think some language that was in the previous presentation that maybe hadn't come over in the new scope is identifying the gaps. That is definitely a focus that we have in the original concept of the contractor, so something that we can translate over to the project scope.
Yeah, I think that would be really good, just so that we can make sure that we're not doing, unfortunately, what we historically do. People are organized, they know how to reach us, they know how to come to the meetings. Like the whole purpose of this exercise was to really try to get to those residents in our community that are not engaged. And so we have to figure out where those gaps are and identify ways to engage them, so that we can get them to do things like be in the education initiatives and things like that. Other than that, I think, just again, taking a look at the deliverables versus the outcomes and making sure that we're not missing some key aspects that were included in some of the earlier materials that were provided on the NLC goals of the program and what you all were planning to do and the purpose. And just kind of think about how you can turn that into something that a contractor with 18 months of technical assistance could help us fill. And then the other big piece is, because I agree that we're gonna probably end this 18-month experience realizing we need permanent help, right? This 18 months will probably help us with establishing the infrastructure for whoever comes in. They're not going to come in blind and have to build it themselves. Ideally, it would be built. It gives you 18 months to figure out how to shuffle around FTE if you want to bring one in, But it also, so I do think it is important, probably not for the consultant to do, but for you all as managers of this effort to be thinking about how this may ultimately lead to aspects of a position where there's clear roles, clear work, clear ongoing things that'll need to be done, and how you may need to address that gap 18 months from now. I'm going to continue to say it. We talked many moons ago about having someone to work on like race equity, to be our race equity staff person that would be responsible for really trying to help more with how do we make sure that our policies and our work and our efforts take that racial equity lens, including educating staff and convening staff and working with engagement and all of those things. There may be some novel ways that once you kind of get to the point where you realize some of the things that need to happen in terms of communication and how to fill gaps and what's needed, that you may then say, you know what, maybe we could piece together a position that could solve some of these two long-standing issues that we've had as a city. One, how do we engage more effectively? Because we do a lot of outreach, we do a lot of engagement. The question is just, are we hitting the right people at the right time with the right information, right? And so you have that piece, but then we also have the aspects of the need for addressing disparities across the board, language, race, all of those things, and how do those two may come together, and they might, which then might also increase our capacity in that other avenue as well. Not trying to blow up your spot, just saying that I think from looking at some of this, it's gonna naturally come out. And so you may find yourself at the end of 18 months realizing that you need to fill a couple of gaps. And again, to the city manager, figuring out how to shuffle the decks in terms of your FTE, because I don't know if in 18 months we're going to be able to give you an increase. So you might need to move some people around. But there may ultimately end up, once this is done, with a really clear framework for how you can address some of our engagement woes, as well as potentially building some internal capacity as it relates to race equity. So with that, not seeing any more hands. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands. Is there anything, I'm sorry, I just talked at you. I apologize.
No, it's all good. No, so next week we'll come back with the revised resolution and scope. I do, there's a couple points that I think I'd like to run by city staff, talking about specifically the role or some of the deliverables that will be specific to departments. I think Councilmember Hanzak, you mentioned this specifically. I think that might be a good thing that I can bring up with our internal community engagement working group and start to think through, okay, if we get in a contractor, what are some of the specific department deliverables that we can start to implement? I don't know if I'll be able to get that group together to discuss that in time for next week, but it's one thing that we will definitely take into consideration. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I think those are the things that you need to worry about, the specifics, when you're actually developing the scope of work for your contract, right? Like, as long as there are no gaps in terms of the types of things that the council would like to make sure that the consultant does. In the resolution, you're fine if we don't have specifically create this number of reports and this number of trainings. It's enough to say the idea is that they will provide training and resources for staff, and that could kind of be a little bit all-encompassing.
Perfect.
Councilmember Lamon?
Sorry to come in late, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think that you did a really good job of capturing a lot of the feedback that you did get. And then there's a reference in here now to the city council. I'm not sure we belong ahead of the city staff on the draft whereas clauses. That's, my thought is that maybe that was excessively generous to us and giving us top billing. But I did, as listening to the comments today, I realized that I was in my mind going through all the different categories of organizations, communities of faith, mutual aid societies, all different and recreation department, all these different volunteer groups and civic engagement groups that are not necessarily on front of mind for the Providers Council, but that the city council themselves may be able to make suggestions to the contractor about. And so in determining the field of play that the mayor has been talking about, reaching the people that are maybe not on our normal front burners. So I hope that when this project gets underway, that there can be a special moment given where you kind of canvass the universe of knowledge and expertise here, but also among existing organizations that we fund, many of whom have those tentacles out in the community, to identify the groups and help whoever comes in to do this to do a good job. And I will mention that one of the things that I was discussed with the staff in my conversations with them is how difficult it would be for a true outsider to step in and really be the one who finds those tentacles. And maybe there's somebody on our city staff or somebody in our community who is the right kind of contractor for this position, and that it would really be incredibly beneficial if the person or entity that we find to do this already has deep roots here and wouldn't have to start by asking everybody, now, who is Tacoma Youth Soccer again? Or, but, you know, somebody who would have some knowledge coming into, even though they're a professional in this area. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Lamon. Okay, seeing no more lights on this one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next item is the resolution committing to respective, constructive, and dignified, is that what we're calling this now? I thought we changed the title. And I don't know, I was writing late. And dignified discourse, that's what it is. And so with that, I'm going to actually hand things over to Councilmember Dabala. Yeah, because you've been serving on the NLC board to provide a little bit of background and rationale for this resolution. Yes, thank you.
So in the spring, as a member of the National League of Cities Board, I signed a civility pledge with the National League of Cities. And we were each asked to bring that home and adopt a resolution in our community. That is not the beginning of this, but that's led more to what you have in front of you now. Before that, you may recall at the MML meeting, and some of you went to the spring NLC meeting, several times around here, there's been talk about a dignity index and the dignity resolutions that were Shriver, Mr. Tim. Thank you. Get my Kennedys mixed up. There's so many of them. Okay, Tim Shriver has spoken several times to different groups, and I think almost every one of us has heard him at least once talking about the importance of civility and respect and dignity in civic dialogue, starting with the leaders, such as us, and going out through the staff, through the committees, through the residents, all the way through. And so those two things have led to the presentation of this draft resolution, and thank you, Mayor, for doing the actual writing, which is, I understand, modeled on one of the Dignity Index samples that National League of Cities sent to us. So I think that a healthy democracy, especially at the local level, thrives on respect for the individual. And this resolution, to me, is a commitment to respectful, to constructive and dignified words and behaviors from each of us, even when we disagree, and maybe especially when we disagree. This, to me, is not about whether we allow clapping or any other kind of activity. It's not about restricting the freedom of speech. It's making freedom of speech possible for all by showing respect for others' views, even as we exercise our own freedom of speech in the public space. And I think we all know it's kind of in short supply these days. And in Tacoma Park, as a leader in local democracy, I think we must expect this of each other. So going back for a minute so this is not new, if you will. We've been talking about this as a council since we met for our retreat when we first all started together. it even goes further back than that to the previous council when we were talking about enforceability of rules for behavior, and that didn't go anywhere because just by the very statement of we're going to enforce something that doesn't work. So I hope that's enough of an introduction to this topic, and for sure, it's how I feel. Do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. So the resolution that's before you is a compilation of goals that we as a city have already committed to previously, or priorities, city processes, NLC language in terms of what they were hoping that local jurisdictions would be able to accomplish, or the challenge, and draft a language that the Dignity Index had put forward in terms of potential resolutions that communities could adopt. The resolve clauses are designed to not just be as it relates to our council meetings, although there's some emphasis on public meetings, but we tried to make it a little broader to include community engagement at large. So how can we make sure that we are encouraging, so the first resolve is we're reaffirming our commitment to make sure that we're upholding our public meetings in a manner that upholds dignity, civility, and mutual respect. The second resolve, I keep saying whereas, the second resolve is about making sure that it's all meetings and other forms of community engagement. So this may involve like some trainings or things of that nature, but ensuring that elected officials, staff, boards and commission members, and all others participating in city meetings and other forms of community engagement in public spaces are encouraged to engage one another with courtesy, listen in good faith, and express disagreement without personal attacks. And then the fourth resolve is that we're supporting governance practices that promote communicative dialogue, clear expectations for participation, and fair, consistent enforcement of rules of decorum. And then the last resolve is that the city will really affirms, and I think this is really important, so I think sometimes there's this misinterpretation that enforcing rules of decorum means that you are suppressing debate. And so wanted to make sure that the last resolve made it clear that it's okay to debate, it's okay to differ in viewpoints, but just do them in a way that is respectful, civil, and continues to strengthen both the public trust and the democratic governance. And so this is not to be the clap police, so to speak, but it is to just reaffirm as a council that we are encouraging and will enforce rules of decorum in public meetings, that we're asking our staff, our boards and commission members to also enforce rules of decorum in the public as well, to ensure that it is a welcoming engagement for everyone involved. And so that's the whole purpose of this resolution, to really just reinforce. There may be a need, I think I kind of see this resolution as like a starting point, because it may become one of those things where we start to Ryan's presentation, if this is something that we are pushing as a council, then when you're talking about community engagement, that becomes one of the driving factors. Okay, how can we make sure that we uphold civility, decorum, what are some engagement practices we may want to adopt, especially when we have topics or when we're discussing topics that can be contentious and people can get heated. So what are some tips and tricks that we as a council or our staff may need to know as ways to try to, through the engagement forum itself, de-escalate what could be contentious topics, but still allow for and encourage debate.
Are you looking for a motion?
No, we're voting on this next week.
Never mind.
So with that, if folks wouldn't mind, if you take a look, if you have any edits, thoughts, concerns, please let me know. Also, please let Councilmember Dabala copy both of us on it because I will be traveling over the weekend. All right, any questions, thoughts, concerns? Councilmember Honzak.
I just wanted to express my very strong support of us moving in this direction. I think Councilmember Dabala and I were on a committee on committees that had been discussing some of this for a while. I had the privilege, like many of my colleagues sitting here, of attending the Maryland Municipal League meeting at which we got a full review of the Dignity Index, and I thought, wow, this is really something neat. What's that? Yes, the Dignity Index, which I am holding here. I was in the back for a second, so did you speak about this already? You did, right? Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I would love to see this on the wall, frankly. I think that it is very clear to me, and I'm sure to many of those who are listening, that our country has fallen by the wayside in terms of leadership all across the board, up and down, everywhere you look. My children, one of whom is 20, one of whom is 16, and one of whom is 9, have told me they don't remember a time when people were civil with one another. They don't think that leadership looks like that. So, you know, it tells me a lot about the education that we have an obligation to do. And, you know, I think this is a great step in the right direction, and I struggle with the balance of how do we give it teeth, if you will, without suppressing freedom of speech in any kind of way, which is always the tension that exists in a democracy. But I think if we at least affirm our intention, our values through a resolution or a pledge such as this, we begin to open that door to asking ourselves those important questions when the questions come up. When we have that conversation about the clap, about the rules of decorum, about whether or not, Councilmember Schlegel, you said, you know, are we holding, I'm the worst, I talk a lot. You know, have I gone over my 3 minutes? Am I therefore dishonoring, you know, everybody's time? And so I think all of us have to be mindful, and it's helpful to have nudges and agreements to discuss those in a civil and constructive manner, and remind ourselves when we think that somebody's not doing that to, and I would like us to go so far as to talk about what that looks like. What does a reprimand look like? What should it sound like when we think that someone has violated what are genuine rules of decorum? What does it look like in the social media space? What does it look like on listservs? What does it look like when we hear that our youth council doesn't want to come before us? What happened there? You know, we really have to think about what reprimanding looks like, or allyship or something.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Landman.
Did you want, it seemed like you might want to be.
I just wanted to say briefly, can we take this one step at a time? Do this, then talk about reprimanding, which, as Councilmember Honzak knows, involves the city code and a whole bunch of other complicated things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dabala. Councilmember Landman.
I very respectfully just want to say that I do not think that I'm going to be supporting this, this resolution. And I very much appreciate the spirit in which it was offered by Councilmember DiBala. We've talked about the Dignity Index, and I understand that concept. I think that, first off, I just want to flag that we have a very simply and clearly worded decorum rule that I'll quote: "Those present at council meetings shall respectfully permit speakers to express their opinions without interruption." And I think that that gives us really sort of a clear way of indicating that people should be allowed to express their opinions. I mean, Madam Mayor, you mentioned this is not to be the clap police, so to speak, and I like that phrase, clap police. I understand. The reason I find it problematic to be looking at a resolution right now on this topic is that we have had a lot of attention paid in this city council in the last couple of months to that whole clap police issue, and people feel passionately about the things that they are here to talk about often, and feel that we are trampling on their ability to express themselves when we try and silence them, except for the 3 minutes that they're at the podium, and even, talk about not having signs or waving hands or and expressions of opinion like that. I think it has pushed the envelope too far. And therefore, I think the timing is wrong for us to be reasserting our intention to be looking at fair, consistent enforcement of rules of decorum. That's not language that I think is welcome in this community right now, when people have felt that their ability to simply express themselves courteously has been challenged. So I feel that this meeting is run by you generally, Madam Mayor, with decorum and consistent with the rules that we have on the books now. And I just think that that this is a little bit too, I don't know, it impinges too far on people's feeling that they should be welcome to express themselves with passion about things that are important to them. So it is with great respect, but that's my view as to whether this is needed right now. Thank you.
Point of order.
Councilmember Wesley.
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question of Councilmember Landman, because you referenced that this says fair and consistent decorum. It was some phrase like that, and I wanted to.
I'm quoting from the second to last paragraph of the resolution, which says,
"Whereas
clear expectations for participation and fair, consistent enforcement of rules of decorum." That's
Thank
what
you.
I was citing.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I think that we all want to encourage a positive kind of participation and deep listening from everybody at all kinds of meetings and outreach and things like that. And I think we will need to be thinking about whether a resolution is a strong way to encourage that, or whether there are other ways to do whatever culture change seems to be needed. I do have a question about how big the problem is, and maybe us sharing some stories with each other would help me to understand more where our local community seems to be mirroring things going on the national level. My other thought is just about that word civility. I have to think hard when I see the word civility. I remember studying the Greensboro lunch counter sit-ins, and how when this coalition of students from North Carolina A&T and church leaders, civil rights leaders, when they approached the quote unquote city fathers and said, these are the things we want to see changed, the city father said, well, it's great that you want that, but you're being uncivil in the way you make these requests. The actual title of the book that concerned the whole incident over 2 or 3 years was called Civility and Civil Rights in Greensboro. And so civility is something that in the abstract we all love the idea, but civility can be defined differently in different contexts by different people and in different cultures. So there's always a risk when you say we are fully committing to civility that at some point in the future, someone may say, well, on the grounds of our full commitment to civility, you are not permitted to participate in this discourse.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, I was looking for the section of the council resolution from 2022, our meetings and procedures, but I didn't find it quick enough. I appreciate what Councilmember Landman and Schlegel are saying. I find it difficult to accept that a resolution asking us all to be respectful of each other is somehow being confused with stifling people's passion. It is not. I'm gonna say it again. This is not about what is allowed or not allowed. This is about when I speak with passion, when I speak forcefully and emphatically about my position, that I am not at the same time undermining you. I don't know how else to say it. It's not about my position. It's about everybody else in the room, everybody else in the community. I hope that works. Yeah, let's just read this one more time with feeling. Thank you, if we can, because it's so small. I will simply refer people to section 2.17, 2.165, and I will copy it and send it around at this hour. It's getting a little bit much to be reading this aloud, so that everybody in the council can take a look at what we already have in our procedures and how this may supplement or in any way unintentionally differ. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. I wanted to start by saying that I agree with Councilmember Schlegel that the word civility has always kind of felt off to me, and kind of emphasizing the wrong things, whereas words like dignity and respect resonate a lot more with me, so I just was looking over the draft resolution as we have it. I'm very, the title of it does not have the word civility, and I think the word civility is only in there twice, and one is about how NLC is asking folks to adopt local civility pledges. So I feel okay with this, because I don't feel like it's about drilling down on the concept of civility. I think that this is more about respect. And I also see this as a document affirming respect. I also don't necessarily think this is about the clapping incident, but with the clapping incident, I will recall that I didn't think the issue was a free speech. It was a respect issue. That is how it read to me. It was people being disrespectful of our mayor and the authority that she has. So there's already been a miscommunication around what happened at that event. So I am not inclined to be wishy-washy about this in any way, with folks that, I'm not sure how to say this. Maybe I'll just stop there because I don't know if I'm going to say it right. But overall, I do support this.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. I have seen in this room people nearly attack one another. I've seen and heard profanity. I've personally been called names. I've heard others be called names. And during, air quotes, Clapgate, there was known information that I had regarding the safety of the individuals in this room. And all I asked for people to do is to move the public comment period along. And there was such a blatant disrespect for me asking that thing that it became name calling. It became purposeful disrespect of the rules that have been requested of people in this room. And I appreciate Councilmember Lamb and you saying I do a good job of keeping decorum, but I shouldn't have to do it by myself, right? It is a shared responsibility that everyone in this room has to monitor themselves by seeing the humanity in someone else. Name calling does not, it doesn't get your point across any clearer in terms of the policy issue you want changed. It just immediately shuts the other person down and gets them from listening to what you have to say. It is not about, and what this is not about, is trying to stop people from being able to come and say your piece based on the rules in the 3 minutes that are available to people. It's nothing to stop you from doing that. But it is about respecting other people who also need to come up and provide comments. I'm feeling like you right now because I'm trying to control my passion. Do you think it's any easier for us as a council to hear the message of a person here when there's 50 signs flying in our faces about something different? It is minimizing the voice of the person that's speaking because it's distracting us from what that person has to say. So it is really easy to say we should let people just do their thing. Just do their thing. It means it's freedom. But you have your freedom during your 3 minutes. And as a person who respects someone else's 3 minutes, I don't want to distract from that. And that requires you to think about decorum. It requires you to be respectful of others. It requires you to say, hey, we want to make sure that every person that comes in this room during their 3 minutes gets my undivided attention. And it means don't heckle and have conversations while that person is trying to speak. It means don't wave all of your signs saying something different when that person is trying to speak. It gives that person their 3 minutes. And so I think that when we're talking about civility, it is often being viewed as taking away something from yourself. And that's not what this is about. It is about respecting yourself by demonstrating the respect for others. And so how do we as a council try to set the stage for trying to educate our community more broadly about the importance of that? And so I think that this resolution, simply put, it's something, one, I would say, hey, if it were just us, all right, maybe it's a bit, but this is a growing epidemic across our country. And so there is some education that needs to happen. There is some education that needs to happen. In no way am I saying a kitchen counter sit-in is being uncivil. No, if you want, you're not hitting anybody, you're not doing anything, okay. When we're in these meetings, if you're obeying the rules, you come in, you say your piece, okay. If you want to protest out, yes, do that, right outside. You know, just, you know, there's a place, there's a time and a place, and there's a way that we can make that happen. If this forum isn't the right kind of forum for interactive debate, I think what we're modeling here is saying, okay, let's figure out a way so there could be dialogue, right, which is being called out here. But I do think that it is important for us as a council to take a stand, to join the National League of Cities, to join all of the other organizations that have been meeting and really trying to tackle this issue that is plaguing so many elected governments across this country, to say, hey, we are committed to upholding decorum, to creating room for discourse, but making sure that we're able to do it in a respectful way. So I encourage folks to, if you have some thoughts or concerns or language, to please provide some language. Happy to take it, but I do hope that you all will support us in at least moving the needle forward in trying to encourage respectful engagement amongst all. Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be really quick and add my 2 cents. I've been listening to you all discuss this, especially the conversation about civility. So I went to Mr. and Mrs. Google, and and something struck me from here that I want to share. The definition: civility is the act of showing genuine regard for others through polite, kind, and respectful behavior. Rooted in the Latin word civilis, it goes beyond surface-level manners to encompass treating people with dignity, listening without bias, and that's important, and disagreeing respectfully, even during heated conflicts. And for me, long before you said anything about clapping, I would feel uncomfortable for people when they came up to speak, and 3 people prior to them presenting were clapped for, and then they weren't. And that showed to me, as I'm reading this, that people were not listening without bias. And in clapping for some people and not for others, you're showing that you're not listening without bias. So I just wanted to point that out to you all, and it was already obvious to me that people were not listening without bias. So, and this kind of confirms it for me. So, and that's my take, and I do support this because there's no harm in it at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Councilmember DeBall. Councilmember Wesley.
I just
Is
want
that
to
an old
add
light?
one thing that over these last months, talking with friends and neighbors, all different situations, this concept of discourse being coarser, meaner, it's happening in so many places in different ways. And so that is something that's really struck me, that there's these examples that all of us are going through where this used to be okay. And now when I went, oh my gosh, everyone was so mean and, you know, all those kinds of things. So in the context, I think it's important that we support it from the fact that the NLC is supporting it and asking us to consider and do this. And I also think it's just a way to show an example just to our entire community that despite other things that might be countering the idea of being respectful of others, that's something that we think is important.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, I just want to close, I think we'll wrap it up.
Yep.
I just want to close by saying 2 things. One is that when I introduced this, I said there were a couple of reasons we were doing this, and one was the request from the National League of Cities, because 40 different communities across the country, large and small, leaders from them came together and signed this pledge. So it's not just us, and it's communities across the country that see the need for this right now. But I also wanted to, so that was one reason, and the other was because we have been talking about this from the beginning of our being a council, about how we would characterize our norms of behavior. So notice that I did not say that it had a genesis in what happened a few weeks ago, whenever it was, at any one given council meeting. But I would like to close by reading one phrase from, I'm gonna have to find it, one phrase from the resolution. So the NLC resolution closes by saying that we stand united, this is their resolved, we stand united, leading with respect, dignity, and civility to reduce polarization and create an environment that values shared goals, increased empathy, and genuine dialogue. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Okay, so seeing no more hands on this, this will come back to us next week for a vote. And so now we're dealing with our last item. We are at 11 o'clock, but this should be short.
Yeah, I'm supposed to remind you, 11 o'clock.
The recommended appointments to city boards and committees. So who's going to take care of that? Okay.
I do the best. My voice will hold up. So just to recap, we discussed a couple of weeks ago the appointments for all committees but two. We decided to table the recommendations for two committees so we can have further discussion and visit the comments made by one of our colleagues, Councilmember DeBala, brought up a couple of points that we really wanted to take a serious look at out of respect. And thank you, Councilmember DeBala, for helping us see our blind spots in that regard. So we've since discussed appointments and applications for a Recreation and Community Engagement Committee and the Grants Review Committee, and we have two recommendations for Recreation Committee, and they are Alex Kyles, Ward 3, for the first appointment, and a reappointment for Ken Simler of Ward 1. And for the Grants Review Committee, the appointments, first appointments for Sharon Walchick, excuse me, Ward 1, and Michelle Durango, Ward 5, and reappointments for Sarah Michael, Ward 1, and Ryan Lander, Ward 3. Did I miss something? My apologies. Yes, New Haven. For Grants Review Committee as well. So, okay. So Sarah Michael and Ryan Lander for reappointment. Sharon Walchick, Ward 1 for first appointment. Michelle Durango. Eileen Fabriga, and New Haven Michael. My apologies. So those are the 6 appointments for Grants Review Committee. Did I miss anything, Councilmember Honzak or Councilmember Schlegel? Okay. And
Would you just be able to say the awards for the last 3 or 4 names?
For the Grants Review Committee, they
Yes.
are, again, reappointments for Sarah Michael and Ryan Lander, and the first appointments for Sharon Walchick, Michelle Durango, Eileen Fabrigo, and New Haven Michael.
And do we have their ward identifications?
Okay, Eileen's Ward 6, New Haven, Ward 2, Anybody know Michelle Durango's ward? My apologies. All right, and so we also want to discuss the requests for Sustainable Maryland to expand their membership from 9 members to, and I guess that's something we could discuss, whether or not we would allow them to expand from 9 to 11 or 12 members. I'm not sure, Jesse, if we had, if you have any notes about where we wanted that number to be.
I think that that item is with me. I am supposed to be having a conversation with Dory and Director Braithwaite on that, as well as I believe that committee has a couple of other items that need to come before council. It was my understanding that they don't need that expansion right this instant, but there was something that they were interested in.
And did you have that ward?
Okay. So just for the working group on committees, that is something that we'll follow up. It'll be after recess, but we will need to have a conversation about, because that would require a code change. And also just want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of whether or not the need of the added members, and make sure that there's an agreement between the understanding of staff and what the committee needs and what we think.
Point of information on the rule change, if I may. If the rules allow for alternates to be appointed, they do not have alternates as an option right
No,
now?
and they don't have ex officio either, I believe. I think they're a straight 9. They are straight. They're straight 9.
But they could have,
9 members.
if I may.
Point of
Um,
order,
but-
Mayor. Oh, yeah, you're speaking. sorry.
Yeah, it is possible for them for the code to change, for them to have alternates and/or ex officio. And not changing the code, they can have unofficial members who sit on work groups within the committee, because other committees have done that with some success. But that's alternatives to
What
just
they're asking
giving
for.
them more bodies. Thank you.
Also, the meetings are open as well to participation from other community members, I think, for all of them. Am I wrong about that? I know that there are several committees, at least recreation, where multiple people who are not voting members regularly participate. Yeah, that's what you
Yeah.
mean, right?
I think
Yeah.
that what they're looking for is additional
Yeah.
voting members.
And
May I?
compensation, presumably the compensation would only be for committee members, so
That's
that would
right.
be a factor.
Right, yeah. May I
Mhm.
add, as one of the subcommittee members, and Councilmember Schlegel, if you have anything to add as well. In prior rounds, I have had the ability to spend time analyzing some of the data to see how much progress we've made towards some of the diversification goals that we've had. But the council set up prior to the council that I was on, actually. I did not have a chance to do that this time, but I do want to share that one broad stroke observation that we have all had is that we continue to have lower numbers of applicants from wards 4, 5, and 6. And so there continues to be, not as many folks from wards 4, 5, and 6. I'm looking at myself and my council members to my right. So, this could be a key issue, actually, for our community connectors individual to ponder with us meaningfully, I think. We also would love to see more, racial diversity on our committees. And we don't have any questions about things like socioeconomic diversity. We actually aren't collecting data on anything except COLTA about renters versus others, which is a proxy, right?
I
Yeah.
believe that now the application does include whether or not home, own or rent.
Oh, we did add
Yes,
that. Okay, we did
added
discuss that. Thank you, Secretary Carpenter, or Clerk Carpenter, pardon me. I was trying to think what your title was. Clerk Carpenter. I was going to call you Jesse. So yeah, that's great. I think that's progress, because it would be wonderful for us to be able to really collate that data and look back on our goals and the progress we've been making over time, especially as we change out some people and move in new ones, and we haven't had the chance to do that. So if my colleagues have any suggestions for even ways that 1, 2, and 3 could help us with recruitment in 4, 5, and 6 too, we'd be really grateful for ideas. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. City
May I
Clerk?
provide
Yes.
the ward information? So for the rec committee, it's Ken Simler, Ward 1, he's a reappointment, and Alex Kyles, Ward 3, is a new appointment. And then with the grants review committee, reappointments Sarah Michael, Ward 1, Ryan Lander, Ward 3, Sharon Wolchik, Ward 1, Michelle Durango, Ward 5, Eileen Fabrega, Ward 6, and Nuhamin Michael, Ward 2.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And so those appointments will come back to us next week for a vote. And so with that, I think we're done for the evening, correct?
I had one more question too.
Go ahead.
Mayor. As we were discussing the Recreation Committee, that had so many people step down and trying to figure out what may be the issues there, I had a question of whether or not we had an exit interview process or provided surveys to members who had stepped down, or to get an idea of how the committee was performing. And I can't remember if we discussed that or if we have anything like that. But if not, I think it would probably be a good idea so we could have some information about how these committees are performing.
Right, yeah, and in fact, there were 1 or 2 people who were appointed who never showed up.
Oh, really?
So we do have a problem that needs to be addressed.
I'm not sure how we would approach that if we develop a survey or
But
something.
I'm sure we could do something like that.
Councilmember Hazard.
So I think I'm correct that technically speaking, we have a rolling admissions, committee appointment process, but we've moved it to a higher frequency at twice a year. Is that, I'm looking at our mayor and our clerk, yes, technically speaking.
Correct, people can
But we haven't been
apply
doing that.
anytime.
Yeah,
But the appointments are limited to the twice a year.
right, okay.
All right. Okay, I think that's it. Everybody have a fantastic night.